And we'll start with a mic check, please.
Chair Gradine,
Here.
Vice Chair Tripp, Board Member Miller,
Here.
Board Member Moore, absent, Board Member Watkins,
Here.
and Board Member Witosh.
Here. Okay, thank you. We start with item A, which is public comment. If there's anyone that would like to address the board on any item not on today's agenda, please come forward. Seeing no one, we'll go to item B, which is the approval of the minutes of the Architectural Board for April 24th. Take comments on those minutes, please, starting with item 1 and 2 or anything before those. I was not here, so I will not be making comments or amendments to the minutes. Three and 4.
Sorry, number
It's all right.
one.
Number 1, sure.
Number one, or item 2, sorry. Number 9 under the motion. I think we just wanted to study the carport. Study the carport and if it will be part of the design. And then I think if if it will be part of the design and how the detailing would be in keeping with. This is just kind of a. I think we could just say study if the carport will be part of the project and how the detailing will be in keeping with the design of the building.
Mm-hmm.
Did we have an opinion about the whole solar panel carport design in general? Because we have 3 comments that say study. I think it's a little unclear.
Yeah, we were split on our straw vote if we wanted to have it on the roof or the carport. We were like 2 and 2, and so I think from what I remember, we said it could be, we could, support either. It was just if it was going to be part of the carport, we wanted more detailing, I guess, around that design and how it was tied to the building.
Okay.
But yeah, it seemed there.
I was not here for that.
Yeah.
I have another comment on that item, unless you have anything else.
No, it was just adjusting that last one.
So motion number 6 on page 3, the last one, the previous cement panel layout with a denser detailing pattern was preferred. That's opposite from what the comment was, in my opinion. We were looking for, or no, that is correct. Never mind.
Yeah, I think because we liked the previous one more.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Other comments? On any item 5 or 6, 7 or 8? Howard, you were absent the entire meeting.
I was.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I ask a question of clarification for item 5?
Okay.
812 Jennings was a project that was coming before us off of consent because it was, I think, unique in nature that it was dealing with short-term conversion from a residence to a short-term rental, and I think we're going to be seeing more of those.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think,
yeah.
David, just because we spoke earlier, I know the issue there. I think the proper time to bring that up is in when we get to announcements.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
And yes, yeah. But right now, it's just the minutes and making sure the minutes reflect the meeting. So we need a first and a second to approve the minutes, please.
Well, first.
Amy?
Second.
Seconded by Courtney. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstaining? Howard and I are abstaining. All right. So we'll go on to the consent calendar, please, for May 1st.
For the May 1st consent calendar of the Architectural Board of Review consent. Item A, 6100 Becknell, review after final, there we go, approval of review after final. Item B, 1507 San Pasqual, project design and final approval. Item C, 1626 Santa Barbara Street, continued indefinitely with comments. Item D, 3951 State Street, continued 2 weeks with comments. Item E, 3940 State Street, continued 2 weeks with comments. Item F, 3825 State Street, project design approval and continued 2 weeks with comments. Item G, 28 Anacapa Street, project design and final approval with comments. And item H, 2017 Bath Street was postponed to today's agenda.
Okay, so we need a first and a second for approval of May 1st.
First.
Courtney?
Second.
Seconded by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
For the May 8th, 2017 consent calendar for ABR,
Thank you.
we have item A, 3111 State Street, final approval with condition that applicant provide radius detail for concrete benches. Item B, 6100 Hollister Avenue, final approval with condition that the applicant provide detail of outside corner of corrugated metal. Item C, 1116 San Pasqual, final approval with condition that the windows be recessed 2 inches. And there was also a annual resident survey for AUD projects read into the minutes for that final approval. And then project D, 216 West Haley, PDA, project design approval and final approval. Item E, 302 East Coda Street was continued indefinitely with a comment that the tree should stay and can be accommodated. The fence shall be no more than 42 inches. That the applicant should provide plans showing location of the new proposed fence, and the applicant should provide details of the new fence. Item F, 920 East Haley Street, was continued indefinitely with the applicant to provide fencing details, accurate parking dimensions, accurate fence dimensions, and accurate plans depicting the entire scope of work. And item G, the 1800 block of Cliff Drive was given PDA, or project design and final approval as submitted.
Okay, so we need a first and a second for the minute.
First.
Courtney?
Second.
Seconded by Amy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, announcements, requests by applicants, etc.
We have 2 announcements today. Board Member Miller will be stepping down from item 3, and Board Member Moore will be absent from today's meeting.
Mr. Lamone?
Yes, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit today about something Mr. Watkins was asking about earlier in the week about reconsiderations. And I just wanted to reiterate our existing guidelines that the ABR has adopted with respect to reconsiderations. And what it really points out is city council direction on what we should do when it comes to reconsiderations. There's two primary concepts that need to be respected. One is there isn't a reconsideration discussion amongst board members, that you are to contact staff if you believe that there's been additional information that you've become aware of, or that you have a change in your vote that you would like to have considered by the entire board. And in doing that, the city attorney has indicated that it has to be timely. And what we mean by timely is that it should be stated that you are requesting a reconsideration to be placed on the next available ABR agenda. So if you have ever the idea of having a reconsideration, you should contact staff immediately following the meeting. The actual guidelines say within 2 business days. And the reason we do that is we typically have to also involve the applicant in that reconsideration. It's only fair to have that applicant return back and be present for that type of discussion. The reconsideration can only be initiated by someone who voted on the prevailing side. And it does take the entire board to vote on that reconsideration motion. So first you need to put it on for discussion and vote on it. And if you too, in fact, decide to reconsider, you could still open it up and come up with the same vote if you'd like. But it's just bringing it back to let's have a discussion about it and discuss the merits of why the project should be approved or denied. In this case, it's a little unusual because we have an appeal already filed. So it's kind of a difficult challenge to or reopen something that's already been appealed. So that's sort of the difficulty I was having with some discussion about having it reconsidered when, in fact, an appeal has already been filed and essentially going towards that decision point. So that's some of the consideration I will convey back to whoever calls me about that vote and whether or not it's an appropriate way to continue. You can still have that debate at council. This board has the right to attend and voice contrary opinions. We don't like to see that, but definitely if it's a split vote, I think council would want to know what the thoughts are on why certain members approve the project or deny the project, and we're on opposite sides to get that consideration. Sometimes the minority vote is noted why you're objecting to the project or why you're feeling strong enough to not be in the majority, and that can be requested to be added into the motion if you want, because again, the council will get these minutes and they'll want to know why 2 or 3 members didn't vote for this motion or agreed to oppose it. Mm-hmm. So does that sort of explain what the
that's
rationale
helpful.
behind that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And is that outlined in our guidelines?
Yes, it is.
What
It's
page is that?
Page 54
Okay.
of our guidelines.
Okay, thank you. So, can you hang around for a bit while we discuss
Sure.
this item, or while the board? Because I think David still wants to bring it up as a question.
Sure.
Okay.
I do caution you that I think the scope of this should be questions directed to staff rather than an internal discussion about the project merits.
Okay.
You can talk about process and questions to staff, but not about the project itself, because it's not on today's agenda.
Right.
But the process of voting to reconsider, that would have to be with the applicant here? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, and it's not on today's agenda, so there's not a vote to reconsider today placed
Okay.
on the agenda.
Okay. So, David, any other questions?
If I could,
Yeah.
I think it is important because the questions were more specific to staff, and I know we are going to be probably seeing more of these projects. We have one on our agenda
You will
today.
be, yes.
So if I could ask you a couple, Mr. Chair, could
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
could I ask
Sure.
a few questions?
sure.
I think the first point that I was struggling with the other day was the issue of the compatibility with the general plan, and because it was a land use issue of there was one aspect of this particular project being located in a legally non-conforming in a particular zone, and so there was one aspect where that general plan would actually want to push those kind of projects into conformance. So in that respect, it met the guidelines of the development plan. What I was finding at odds was that it was contrary to the housing element, that it was no longer providing housing in the area when there was already a neighborhood of single-family residents that was there. And I think one question I had for Ms. Brooks was whether one aspect trumps another, and that kind of consideration. What becomes, I guess, the defining criteria, though? Is it the housing element, or is it the fact that we're moving a project out of a legally non-conforming status?
Well, what's unusual about development plan approvals of this type is, in our wisdom, we've clarified that one of your findings is sound community planning, and sound community planning was never defined anywhere for you. So the question would be, using as much information that's presented to you to see if one trumps the other as far as concerns. What's unusual about this type of new use that's being proposed to be legalized is you're not the only board struggling with that question. We have an appeal that's been filed for an HLC approval that also will be taken before City Council. So I think what our position is, we're going to rely on our boards to make those decisions and cite whatever reason you think is important to cite, and have council ultimately rule on whether that logic is should be supported. And that's what's going to happen with these projects. They're going to go up to City Council. We're going to have a discussion, and you'll be probably given some clear direction about what they would like to see. And until that happens, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait and see how that comes. Now, that doesn't make your job easier, but I would encourage you to just listen to the applicant's perspective and listen to the public's perspective and try to balance both concerns and make your decision accordingly.
Okay. May I ask another question? Mr.
Yes,
Chair?
yes.
There was another aspect from planning, I guess it was planning and transportation, was there was a discussion with the single car garage for this project that we're kind of referring to, and that there was a discussion because it was no longer conforming to current standards that planning had suggested to him somehow. I don't know how that conversation was brought up, that they would like to see that garage not used as a legally non-conforming garage now, which pushed parking more into the front yard, which created this issue of visibility that a lot of the neighborhood citizens who showed up were complaining about. So my question in that situation is what was triggering that fact? Was it because it was being converted to a short-term rental, not a residential use? In that situation, a non-conforming garage could be used as a covered garage now? Do you have any insight on that kind of situation?
It probably had to do with the specific dimensions that are allocated for that space.
It's definitely short.
Yeah, and so some of the concerns that transportation has is if it's not going to be functional, then we wouldn't probably propose it as it was historically used. Because again, more transient occupancies, there's probably a variation of vehicle size, and therefore we want to be realistic with how it will function. If it's undersized, likely it's not going to be used the way it's identified as being used. So again, you have to balance that with it. Sometimes the city requirements will make a project better, and sometimes it will impact it in a negative way, perceived by the public. So again, those are definitely concerns that you could cite as a basis for how you vote. And ultimately, if you have a rationale for why you're making a vote, I think it's legitimate to present to council and when you make those decisions. But ultimately, I think until we ever hear from council, they want to know exactly what your concerns were.
And just to follow up on that, the question I had that wasn't able to be answered that day was, if it is being converted to a short-term rental and it's no longer as residential in nature, I guess primarily, does that mean that it has to conform to commercial standards then for parking, accessibility, things like that?
There are some exceptions for one-unit conversions, and I think that's the dilemma. Our zoning code really doesn't deal with this, and it just treats it as commercial uses, hotel uses. But there's also a compromise that's given by building and safety, saying one unit does not translate to complete accessibility requirements. And so I think that's why you're not seeing this disabled parking requirements applied to these units.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. One other announcement I know is that Howard is going to be absent in June, and Amy is also going to be absent for the June 12th meeting.
For the June 19th.
June 19th meeting. So do we have any other known absences at this time by board members who are present in June? No? Okay.
So, I mean, I could stand in for the consent calendar on the 12th.
Okay,
I have a question for staff.
yes, go ahead, Courtney.
Have there been any applications for open seat? I'm seeing
Not at this time.
shakes
They're
and
flooded,
nods.
right? There's just so many, don't know what to do. No
No,
applicants.
none at this
nothing.
time.
Okay. So we've had a lot of issues with quorum and people being gone, so.
Yes, and we've been raising the issue, trying to find out, what's happening. But apparently there was that the department of the city that's in charge of soliciting and notifying the community in regards to open applications missed the fact that we were missing a member in the last cycle. So now it's that's why we had a delay. I think perhaps that's one of the reasons we had a delay.
Okay.
But we'll announce once again, since the community is watching, that we are in need of another architect to help fill in the full 7 members of this board. So if anyone is so inclined, we welcome them with open arms. All right, so we'll start, unless there's other announcements or subcommittee reports, we'll start with the first item, which is 321 East Mitchell-Terena Street. And this is a project looking for final review. It's a proposal for a new multifamily development under the AUD incentive program. This is, the third or fourth review of this project. Board members are familiar with it. The unit mix is 1 3-bedroom unit and 2 2-bedroom units totaling 3,097 square feet with an average unit size of 1,032 square feet. And the proposed density will be 20 units per acre on a parcel with a general plan land use designation of medium-high density residential, which means 15 to 27 dwelling units are allowed per acre. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back, I should say.
Keith Rivera Architects.
Lori Romano, landscape architect.
I don't think your mics are on.
There we go.
There we go.
Want to take us through it? The changes, well, we should have minutes, right? Is that why you were looking at me?
There is a minor site plan change, and that there were some comments from last time as well.
Okay, so it was last reviewed December 5th, and the motion was project design approval and indefinite continuance to in-progress review with the following comments. Number 1, study enhancing the small third-floor stair element to appear more as a cupola. Should we go through these one by one and look at them?
Sure, why not? So here is the third floor element, and so we, before, as you might recall, it was just kind of a very minimal kind of doghouse sort of thing, and so here we've mimicked the roof slopes and the detailing to make it more cupola-like. So that was the change there.
Is this a little roof?
That is the guardrail wall around the roof deck, and that has not changed since you saw it last time.
Okay.
So that's kind of poking through the roof plane a little bit.
All right. Okay. Study the southwest corner and south elevations to provide a better alignment between the second-story projection and garage openings below, and allow corner hip roof to complete itself.
Okay, so regarding the garage hip roof, adjusted the roof slopes so that the hip does meet at the corner of the building, just with unequal slopes, rather than before it was kind of cutting back in a little awkward sort of way. Did study kind of the relationship of the bay window with the garage doors down below. It's a little bit of a tough nut to crack, just because the the units are sort of divided the way they are, and then the garage doors kind of have to be the way they are. But so kind of refine that as much as possible. But I think what really the reality is that this is on the alley face, so you're always looking at it very obliquely. You're never kind of like, standing way across the street looking at it in perfect elevation. So given that you're sort of always looking at it at an angle, and this would actually be from the parking lot across the street, but when you're actually in the alley itself, again, this sort of oblique angle, I don't really think the elevation relationship is that critical. So thinking that that's okay.
You
Colors.
did shift something there, though. It was the roof?
Yeah,
meeting
yeah, the
corner?
roof. Yeah, the roof
Okay.
before didn't meet at the corner because it had equal pitches, so we just adjust the pitches so that it would end up at the corner as you want a hip roof to do. And then colors and materials, basically just taking our cues off the existing house. So the first floor is this darker green. All the trim is this cream color like the existing house on the street. The upper floor will then be this light green color, and then the wood or the aluminum clad wood windows, Marvin windows, will be this kind of maroon reddish color that is similar to what we have on the front house. So that's color and materials.
There was one other comment here. Study creating flat, usable open spaces with more privacy using taller plantings.
Switch to the landscape plan here. Yeah, upside down. Let Lori dive in on that.
Okay, so what we did was we added, rosemary Tuscan blue to kind of hide, and I'm looking at it upside down, sorry. So we have a citrus tree to help shield this unit, and we have the rosemary, and then we have the rosemary over here, and also the citrus tree. There's not a lot of room, and so, but the Tuscan blue gets 4 to 6 feet, and it can be sheared, so that's what we chose to do. Thought it would fit with the Mediterranean plantings.
Okay.
And then perhaps while we're here, can just point out the change in the site plan from what you saw last time. Is you may recall along the alley here, there's this big, very full hedge that goes the entire length of the property. And yeah, here's kind of a photo from the street of it. So after some further thought, the owner really liked being able to keep that just for privacy reasons. So we had discussions with staff in Public Works and Transportation. Long story short, they thought that it would be okay to keep the hedge as long as we clipped the last 10 feet of it off just for the visibility of the traffic. So that's what we currently show. So we would remove that 10 feet. We'd take the existing picket fence and just return that around that corner, but then keep that here. So that was the change in the site plan.
Okay. Did we see lighting and window details last time?
Probably not. I do have both though, so let's look at them. So exterior lighting, oops, sorry, is pretty minimal. It's just building mounted wall fixtures, and it's this fixture here. So it's got a solid cap, so it's not kind of shining up in the air. And then door and window details are here. So again, aluminum clad Marvin windows. We've got our shingles, and then the fiber cement trim around the windows that's similar to the detailing of the front house, and that's shown on the elevations as far as the widths and everything.
Okay.
Similar detailing then around doors and garage door and that kind of thing.
And how about those parapets or guard walls,
Yeah, let's see that.
maybe what's kind of typical eave detail as well.
So all the cladding detail is pretty much here with the shingles as far as corner trims and all that. The sort of horizontal band here, so that's kind of padded out to get a little shadow. This is that cap on the guardrail wall. So we're using some kind of concealed angles to fasten that into the side. So we're not fastening any horizontal surfaces, so we can have a kind of a beefy wood-shaped cap on that. Softening eaves at the walls, and then eaves out at the fascia are here. So here's kind of the typical gutter detail, and then on the rake condition.
And does that match the front house too?
No, the front house has the old open rafters and no gutters, which isn't exactly the best for water control. And we're using the high definition JF shingles, so it's got a lot of kind of vertical play between the planes of the different courses.
And the exposed eaves are like 4x material, I imagine, or?
The rafters are 2x material, but we do have T&G underside surfaces where they're exposed. So when you look up, you'll see the T&G.
It's 2x at 16?
Yes. Actually, let me double check. I'm pretty sure they were 2x8s at 16. Yeah. Got the structural here, yeah, because we ended up not doing any sort of truss framing or anything. It's all stick on the roof plane.
Okay.
And again, the rafters on the existing house are, 2x dimensional.
Oh, those are 2x?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see they're spaced pretty far apart.
Yeah. All right. So we'll, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, we'll open it.
Did we see landscape? Because last time we just saw a prelim plan, right? Or did you have the same plan the last time?
Same plan, or, well, was it preliminary? It was color?
I think so,
Okay,
yeah.
so we just took that and made it a working drawing, but it's in the set if you want to.
Yeah, we need to go through that.
It's the same plants. So we have, ground cover hatches, we have the Westringia, agave, salvias, lamandras. The existing, so we're adding a new olive here, adding a Gaijera
And how
street
big are
tree, 36-inch box, 36-inch box. And the lemon is a 24. And then we have the gravel path, and we have some pits and some prunus, crassifolium for hedge material. We have some vines, gruya, then this is a fig actually, crawling up the fences, and we've got the kalanchoe, oak leaf, and just here's our rosemary, and then which gets pretty tall, and then our tree. Fencing, and then this is just mulch because it's a space where people won't travel and just needs to be accessible. We're keeping the existing bougainvillea here. And
There are vines here, is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, distinctus. And then we have some boulders that we're using as part of the landscape. The client really liked the Muse, Victoria Muse, so kind of got that going on.
And the patio is stone? The patio's at the back?
This is a Cherokee it's sand set, so it's permeable. This is gravel, and then, and then we have step stones with planted joints going through, meeting up with the gravel.
Okay. And your backflow device is where?
On the We're over here. We're in the Bougainvillea somewhere. We're going to put it in, tuck it in.
Well, is there a fence there, though?
This is that hedge.
The hedge
And
is
here's, and the picket fence returns to the hedge. And then this is a big, get that front
Why
picture
does
going.
it look like there's a line that goes all the way to the building? Is that something else?
That's the fence, isn't it?
Well,
This
that's
is-
not
this is-
what they're saying.
This is the fence here, and then,
This is probably just a drafting inconsistency. The picket fence would stop at the line of the hedge.
Okay.
And so again, here's the picture of that hedge at that area, so. it's-
Right. This doesn't really show how it screens the backflow, though, so what are you using to screen the backflow?
so we have Westringia, Salvia, Westringia.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll open up public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to comment on this project? Seeing none, we'll go to questions from the board. Howard?
I have no questions.
Courtney?
No questions.
Amy?
Just on the site plan, or can you go back? It doesn't matter which site plan. Is this out, where's the purple? Yeah. Is this outdoor area for the front house? Or is it just
Correct.
kind of communal area?
No, it's for the front house.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. David, questions?
Yeah, you go to page A3.1. There's a note calling out the wood brackets. There's a note calling out the wood brackets, 6.3 on your keynotes, or your elevation notes, and it says refer to detail 13 on 8.1, but there's no detail 13.
Okay, let's see. Oh,
And all the sheets
It's-
are labeled the
it's-
same.
on A1, actually. This is that, the decorative bracket.
So I have two, one,
A81,
I don't have an 8.1.
okay, you've got a.
I have two
incomplete set.
8.2s, yeah, so that's probably why, okay. What's the size of that bracket?
They're 4x6 horizontal, and then got the beveled end. It's similar to the front house. It has beveled end at the end of the brackets
end
there.
zone.
Both 8.2.
Do you have that problem on your
Yes,
side?
I have the
Okay.
same. I have that problem.
Okay, not just me. And then if you go back to the elevation sheets, on north elevation, A3.1, at the ground level, there's two little sidelight windows that are flanking these doors, and it looks like the trim is, on each unit, is stepped off each other, and there's a little bit of,
Yeah, in reality, we'd probably jam those
would you
together.
pull those together, maybe just
Yeah.
make one trim piece between the window and the door?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you go down to the south elevation, I had a question about the, where you have two single-hung units up on the second level, on that south elevation? Yes. That post that runs between the two units, right at the base there, it looks like there's some line work that maybe indicates there's like a base cap kind of detailing that's occurring where that post meets the sill. Is that accurate?
I think that might just be the hatch pattern of the shingles, just
Going
kind of
through.
showing below that, yeah.
So that trim piece separating the two window units, or whether it's a 2 or 3 panel unit, would just be flush with the trim around the exterior?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Comments? Howard?
I think the project is ready for preliminary design approval and
Well, it
actually
has-
for final approval.
Final approval?
Yeah.
That's what they're looking
Yeah.
for? Okay, very good. Courtney?
I don't have any comments.
Amy?
Yeah, I think it's also ready for final approval. My only comment would be on the landscape plan. And it's just a suggestion to maybe try to connect the path from this stair to this area. It would only be my suggestion.
It is connected here, and then it goes here. To where then? So it runs along here, all the way up.
I guess I was Well, the suggestion was just so if you're coming out of this, I assume you'd come out of this door, maybe maybe connecting it a little closer than this, but it's just a suggestion. Otherwise, I think the changes are acceptable, and that I like the color palette, and I also think keeping that hedge is a good addition.
Okay. David, any comments?
I find it acceptable, maybe with the two comments that the glazing at the windows be pulled tighter against the door units. There's not a separation between the two.
Got it.
And then, and maybe just more in terms of housekeeping, just clarifying around those trim bases and stuff where that hatching is occurring, that it's not, doesn't get red in the field as part of the trim work, that it's just cleaned up so it represents as what you're implying in your details. But other than that, I think it's ready to go.
Okay. Who would like to make a motion then?
Move for final approval as submitted with the comments about moving the window together and the suggestion about the connection of the path to in the back there between the buildings.
Okay, that was stated as a suggestion rather than a comment.
I did
You
mention
want-
that. I used the suggestion word.
Okay. All right. So the comment, final approval with the comment that the door and windows indicated on the north elevation at the first floor be brought closer together, or just make that a single trim piece? Okay. So that the door and window be brought closer together to make the adjoining trim piece a single piece. And that there was a suggestion to connect, do you want to restate that suggestion?
I guess just to connect the outdoor space for the front unit just closer to the back door.
Okay. So then we need a seconder to that motion.
I'll second.
Seconded by Amy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks very much.
This is not a complete set.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you. Did we need to read something into the motion for that?
No, that was for.
That's for a different.
Okay, all right. So we're on to item 2. Almost right on time. 15 seconds off. I know, it's unheard of.
Very impressive.
This is a new item. Proposal for a new residential unit under the AUD incentive program. Project consists of the demolition of an existing 2-car garage as well as 58 square feet to the rear of the existing duplex, and the construction of a 1,290 square foot addition to the rear of the existing duplex containing a 630 square foot 3-car garage and a 660 square foot second-story residential unit. Unit mix will include 3 one-bedroom units ranging in size from 648 to 836 square feet, with an average unit size of 715 square feet. Proposed density is 27 dwelling units per acre, and in this zone, 27 is the maximum allowed. Also proposed is a new trash enclosure, new private outdoor living spaces to be enclosed with fences and gates, and replacement and reconfiguration of the existing driveway. So comments only today. Project requires environmental assessment. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Dennis Thompson, architect, and this is Seth Hatfield, the owner.
Hello.
And I think we got the owner's name wrong. We'll have to get that cleared up at one point. It's the previous owner, so they're new owners. Just to orient you to the property, this Cottage Hospital is right about here. This is Los Olivos, and this Parker Way is a little short street that ends right there. So our project is right on the corner. It's a 2-story house, 2-story duplex, and a little garage behind it. Here's the streetscape. This is the house. This is the little house across Parker Way. So Parker Way kind of looks like an alley, kind of looks like a driveway, but it is a public street. This is across the street, and this is across Los Olivos, and this is across Parker Way. So this is a apartment over 3-car garage, which is very similar to what we're proposing. Here's a close-up of the front of the house and then the sort of southeast corner. It's a very nice house. It has this big dormer in the upper unit and a nice glazed front porch. And then here's a little more of a look at the back. Should probably use this with the so-called 2-car garage and the back of the 2-story house. This is from the 1920s, and I think the garage was built about the same time. So we take off of this small bump out. Now, if we look at the site plan, we remove this little piece of the back, remove the garage, which is sitting on the property line, and build a 3-car garage, which would be very similar to what's going on right over here across Parker Way. And then on the second floor, a modest little studio, well, 1-bedroom apartment, about 660 square feet. And no change to the front of the house, although this is really here just for concept, so we'll be back with more development. I wanted to get something in quickly to sort of get your feedback on it. I've got a lot of planning feedback. This is the suggested addition to looking from the Parker Way elevation. This is the north elevation, sort of the back end of the house. And here's sort of the other back side away from the public side. So there's an existing staircase up to the second story. There'd be a sort of matching staircase up to the new unit above. So we end up with these 3 small 1-bedroom units.
Okay. Looks pretty straightforward. Does that complete your presentation?
I think so. I know I have issues here with transportation. We've got a potential setback issue with these two have great open yard issue. It's hard for me to get a private open space for this front unit. And it's hard for me to find another place for the trash enclosure. So I'm open to suggestions, but that's in the front yard and the side yard. That's in this front yard. So we've got 2 front yards we're sort of suffering with. So I welcome any suggestions on how to treat those. So when we really go into a serious design, we'll have all your input.
Okay. Great. So we'll open public comment. Is anyone here that'd like to comment on this project? Yes. Oh, yeah. We've got a letter and we have a couple of speaker slips. So we'll start with Jody Lipner. Yes. Why don't you come here, or this is open. Let's have you over here. And we'll put you on a microphone, and you have 2 minutes to make comments.
Okay, I'll try and read my husband's comments in really quickly. He emailed today. He works at the Cottage Hospital, so he had to do it in between cases. And then I'll try and put a couple of extra comments. My name is David Huerta, and I'm Jody Leibner, his wife, and we live at 2202 Parkway Drive. That's the unit that's just the other side of the project. Our home, 2 bedrooms, is 650 square feet. So this would be a new 2-bedroom unit in our world. The property adjacent to the west, proposed construction on 414 West Los Olivos Street. Parkway Drive is a cozy, narrow, private lane which houses Parkway Drive, not Parker Drive, is a narrow, private lane which houses a collection of small 1920s residential structures and very small lots. It is this smallness that gives the charm, but it's also the reason why it's built out to capacity. And obviously, have you heard, the density on this lot would be at its capacity if this project is approved. The impact that the additional residences will have on our narrow street is of great concern. There's no parking on Parkway Drive, as is a fire lane, and only 90-minute parking is allowed on Los Olivos Street. Not long ago, the city approved the addition of a second unit on the property directly adjacent to the west of our house, 2204 Parkway Drive, and he submitted some pictures, but the impact that the additional residence has had on our small neighborhood, they park on the road for the construction, the vehicles park on the road, and the road has gotten very beat up. Adding yet another unit will seriously impact the traffic and safety of an already crowded little street. It's a very narrow 12-foot lane drive, and for us to back out of our houses, we basically have to back onto everybody else's property because it's so old there. Another concern is the impact a second-story structure will have on the access to sunlight. As previously mentioned, this neighborhood has small, narrow lots, so adding height to the surrounding structures will seriously impact our access to sunlight, specifically to our kitchen and living room. Sorry. I ask you to reconsider allowing an additional second-story unit to be built in an already impacted older neighborhood. There's already limited space between the existing structures. Therefore, adding a unit above the garage will box in our very small house, thus impacting our access to sunlight and our privacy. If it is deemed that this addition has to be allowed, okay, I'll add a, if I'm a realist, I'm actually a planner myself. If the city is going to allow such a, we would ask that not just meet the setbacks, but increase the setbacks. And we're very concerned. Our driveway is very narrow, and if a fence is run right along the property line, we probably won't be able to open our doors to get out of the car. The trash.
Sorry, your time is up. I just have one question for you. Where's your property in relation to this property?
See, we can't.
This is a aerial view,
Okay,
and this is the corner lot that we're looking at.
we're here.
You're here.
Yes.
Okay. And you're
So it
saying
looks
if,
to me like you
oh,
guys
we
have
done.
already-
Sorry, we're not. We
sorry.
try to discourage discussion between folks here.
And we noticed that the trash enclosure was also in the setback. Again, the fact that you can't get the private living space in there just leads to the fact that it's constrained already. The unit across the street is in a different situation, and that is historically been there. It's not a new one. I'm sorry, it has historically been there. It's not a new one. But again, our suggestions would be, increase the setback, given the density that they're proposing on here. Again, the 650 square foot.
We don't need you to repeat.
Okay.
We got
Well,
the
then the
message,
other
and your
comment-
time is up. I'm sorry.
Okay,
That's what I'm
400
saying.
square feet is the minimum. Why not go to that?
Thank you. If we give you more time, then we have to give everyone more time, and then we never go home. So 2 minutes is what we allow. Thank you very much for coming in. Michelle Carbone.
My name is Michelle Carbone. I own the property at 425 West Dos Olivos, so we're basically diagonally across the street from this project.
So they're here, so you must be here. That would be diagonal.
Theo, we are this property right here.
Okay.
Our concerns are just that the setbacks are met. Our concerns are just that the setbacks are met and that you do not allow any variances to the existing zoning and regulations and rules for this area. I second her comment. The parking is kind of a zoo there already, and there aren't that many spots, and most people own more than one car, and they're already parking on the street and juggling their cars and guest cars. So parking would be an issue for us too. And we may hope that you do maintain setbacks on this project. Other than that, we're pretty happy with it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. We also have a letter from David Huerta, who lives at.
I think she read his letter.
Is that right?
That
Is
was
that
the
your
same
husband?
letter.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Get triple time.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So we'll go. We'll close public comment and go to questions from the board. Howard.
Which is the front of this property?
Right where your finger is there, Howard.
So Los Olivos is the front, and the setbacks, the front yard setbacks are from that.
Yeah, well, David Eng told me that we have 2 front yard setbacks, but we're able to choose which one to call our front for purposes of picking the rear. So I'm calling this one,
Parker Way?
I'm calling Parker Way the front so that this can be an interior. Right? This is my 10-foot rear. So I've chosen to use the 6-foot on this side.
So I'm looking at a plan that's been marked up with a lot of red
Yeah.
comments, and some of them have to do with items placed in the front yard setback. Is that this little light dotted line there?
Yeah, it's a 10-foot setback from the property line on, what is it, Parker Way? It's not
Is this
Parkway.
the Parker Way side?
Yes. Parkway.
Okay,
Parkway.
It sounded like you were saying this was your front yard in the previous comment.
I'm calling this my front yard so that my 10-foot rear setback is
Okay,
there.
okay.
But this is also a front yard with a 10-foot setback. But I'm allowed to have, I don't have to have 2 rear setbacks. I'm allowed 1 interior. So I'm choosing this to be the interior so that I can get 3 cars, which, by the way, there is no parking for 2 cars now. So we're creating 3-car parking for 3 units.
Okay. Other questions, Howard?
Could you please explain what is meant by this comment about the Unit A private open space 180 square feet, which apparently projects into the front yard setback? It says not okay.
Yeah. Now, that's a note from the planner that I've got 2 very generous private open spaces for units. What am I calling them? Well, for 2 of the units, but the front unit that is accessed off Los Olivos Street, I have to maintain a 10-foot minimum dimension in the private yard. It has to be a 5-foot high fence, so it's very private. And yet I can't get that with the 10-foot setback here. So I have not solved that problem yet.
How much private outdoor open space are you required to provide?
It's a very complicated matrix, and I can't remember.
It depends, yeah, it depends on what floor you provided at and how many.
I have them right here if you'd like me to read them.
That's okay. No, we don't. I don't think we need that.
So this private is for Unit A, which you say is the downstairs.
Right. As I said, obviously, I either need to get a modification or redesign that open yard or private outdoor space.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay. Courtney, questions?
So you have 3 one-bedroom units.
Right.
They're all separate, and 3 parking spaces, all covered. So can you just quickly walk me through where those entries are for each unit?
Yeah.
And how you access them?
This one, the ground floor, I call it Unit A, is off the street. That's the biggest unit. It's the whole area here. It's 800 plus. The upper floor would be accessed through a little gate here into their private yard, up the existing stairs, which bring you into the upper unit, which is smaller. It's 648. And then, and the parking for Unit B, which is the upper floor, would be directly adjacent to that yard. Unit C is above the garage, and the access there, they can either come out of their garage door directly up the stairs, or their guests can come in through here and then up the stairs. And then my thought was that they'd all have access to this common trash enclosure, which would also be right off Parker Way for easy access for pickup.
Did you study any other configurations for the parking?
No. You see any others?
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Checkmate.
And previously it was 2 units with
Two units with,
the garage.
well, it's not really a
About ready to fall
garage,
over.
and it's not really 2 cars. It's historically 2 cars. That's what it looks like now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Currently, my tenants are just parking in the driveway, which is about where these 2 spots are shown.
Does this alley go through, or is, I guess, the drive?
No.
It does not go through.
It's kind
It's
of
right
dominated
there.
by that new parking building at the end of the hospital. You just look down that alley and you see the giant wall going up of the new parking structure for the hospital there.
And there's sidewalk on either side. What
Yeah,
appears to be.
Yeah, and it's actually
like
on
that.
our property here. It's this strip here, and I'm not sure where that one falls. I just got a survey yesterday.
And then it's about 12 feet wide, the actual width of the drive itself. Is what's, you've got
That
6
looks
foot
about
there.
right. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, are you proposing any tree removals? Looks looks like there's something here.
This tree, well, this whole trash enclosure is an issue, but that tree falls about there. I just saw it on the survey. So I would rather not remove that. It's a pretty good sized tree.
Okay. That's all I have.
Go ahead, Amy.
So that photo, Courtney, that you, so this is the tree you're saying is about here?
Yes. Although I'm looking at it upside down, so let me verify. Yeah, it's right by the power pole. Right
Do you have
about
any
there.
other photographs, like neighborhood photographs?
Just these of,
In like down Parkway, down like
No.
this area?
no, I don't.
I mean, you can see a little bit there, the next house down anyway.
Yeah.
You kind of see the footprints here, although this one's hidden by a tree.
Where is, because where would you be on the street? Where,
If I can flip it over.
Right,
Yes,
so
right
this is
here.
looking from the hospital
Oh,
down
yeah, yeah.
towards Los Olivos. So this is the
Okay.
house right
oh, I see.
here.
It's got a trailer in the driveway,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah.
right.
Looks like this is another photo that was submitted.
Is that the same perspective, or is
No,
that
I
the
think
other? That's
this
the
is
other
looking the
direction.
other direction, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
this
can-
is before they built that parking building, which you can now see, right?
I can certainly take more photos.
Yeah. Just trying to understand the
Yeah.
context.
Of course, you know,
For
the,
planning, you just did kind of an initial,
yeah, I just got their comments last
so you
week.
just got their comments, so
Just got-
nothing's actually like been
No,
addressed.
I'm going to have to meet with them. I have to meet with transportation, so there's a number of issues.
Those were all the questions I had.
Okay. David, questions?
In your photos, I was trying to see if you had any pictures of what's happening here on the east, off the east property line.
Over here, David?
Yeah.
No.
Could you describe it from your own experience?
I think there's a fence there and a maybe single-family house just beyond it. Whether it's one story or two story, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so,
You need to put it in front of the camera.
oh, sorry. Is your pointer?
Yeah.
The garage is right, the current garage is right up to the property line, and then there's this hedge that runs all along, all the way to the sidewalk, that I would say is probably 8 feet tall at least.
And that's on Parkway, right?
No, this
The
is.
other side?
Okay.
The,
Over here.
yeah, that's the area you were asking about,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
And then you'd get to speak into them. There's a longer pointer right over there.
And this is just these people's backyard, really small little grass area right there. And their house is, I don't know, a couple feet from the hedge, but the hedge is providing quite a bit of privacy. It's really tall and pretty thick and healthy.
Is it a one-story residence or a two-story?
Don't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
You still?
So then, I guess, feeding off that to the architect, was there any consideration when you were looking at the second level to possibly flip the bathroom and the bedroom for any reason, or is there a reason why it's oriented this way right now?
No, I don't think I looked at it the other way, but mainly I wanted to get the kitchen, living room facing this street and not looking toward a backyard. See who's coming and going and, you know, have something to look at. Yeah.
And the last question was, when you were running through the design process, was there any did you find any schemes that successfully brought the access for Unit A? Where we go here? Because right now, you mentioned this in your discussion about the Unit A open space kind of having problems right now, and you do have this ample space over here off the east property line. Is there any direct access from the interior of the existing unit to this side yard?
There's not. the access to the front unit is this, obviously the main
front.
street entry. That might be something we need to look at, is to come out the side of that greenhouse and maybe make that a secondary entry here.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. I'm not sure about since you asked for input about the trash, I'm not sure when it's less than 4 units, but it may be possible that each of the garages could have their own trash inside the garage. And it looks to me like you've got a little bit of room back here. They could be made a little bit deeper. That's maybe one option. And then there's other ways to do accessible trash as well, as opposed to having them all in one location.
Can you put a couple under the staircases?
That's what we'll look at.
But I don't have any questions, so we'll go to comments. Howard, any comments?
Before making a comment, is the location of the garage doors somehow related to the amount of backup space you need to maneuver into Parkway and get off the street, have a guest be able to pull up in front of your garage without blocking Parkway traffic? Is that the thinking there?
There is almost 20 feet there. That wasn't the thinking. The thinking was to let the original building be dominant and to recess my addition a little bit, sort of to let that, play the major role. But I think, there's probably, if this is 12 and we're almost 20 here, there's 32 feet of backup. But
I mean, you don't have to have a car off. If a visitor comes in and parks, that visitor can park without his car overhanging Parkway.
If that's not the case, I think we could make that be the case.
Okay.
We can shift this over a little bit because we do have a lot of space back here.
And then back to this choice between which is the front yard and which is the rear yard and which is the interior yard. So you say you can choose both. Do you choose both?
You can choose one of the two to be
Choose
your
one.
front for determining the rear.
So you choose Parkway to have your rear go along the opposite side.
Right.
So the rear yard, what is a rear yard?
The rear yard is 10 feet on the ground floor. If I had to put my 10 feet here, I couldn't get the 3 cars in. Right?
Okay, so 10 feet on the ground, and then that goes what, to 6 on the upper?
No.
Interior.
Yeah, on
I mean,
the
excuse me.
interior, it's 6, and then it goes to 10.
I see.
But I think on the rear, it's 10 all the way.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I have
Matthew.
the setback right here, and actually ground floor portions for rear setbacks are only 6 feet, unless it's been updated since this is here, and then second story is 10.
Say it again?
Ground floor portions for rear setback are 6 feet, and then second story is 10 feet.
That's correct. So
6 and 10.
10.
Right,
So
okay.
Is that,
yes,
is that true? Sorry, David. Is that true for interior yard? Dennis, I'm sorry.
In the R3 zone, it appears there is a difference between a rear setback and a interior setback.
So the interior is 6 all the way up?
Interior is 6 for both ground and second story.
Okay.
So then in regard to the garage, can garages go to 3 feet, or the garages go to only to 6 feet? Garages, not habitable space.
For a
Doesn't
for the
Does not
sorry.
apply here?
No.
There are garage. So for a rear setback, it's 3 feet, and for an interior setback, it's 6 feet.
Rear 3, interior 6 for garages.
However, the
That's-
board can approve 3 feet setbacks.
What can't?
The board can approve 3 feet. A
I see,
waiver
I
is
see.
3 feet.
Okay.
Really?
So my comments are, the architecture's fine. It would be nice if the two buildings could have the same materials and the same architecture. Also, it would be nice, rather than try to have this look like one big large house, if you could maybe separate the massing so that it have two smaller structures, by instead of running the ridge all the way into the existing ridge. Those are two architectural comments. But the other comments have to do with site planning, and I do think that there are some issues that you could look at these side yards, lower, upper garages can push closer, whatever. I do think that you have some issues there with yards, open space, private outdoor open space, and the trash enclosure. I think that if you, this is going to be a very crowded, it's going to be very crowded. And it may be that the development that you proposed is crowding in areas where if you kind of moved it around a little bit, you could take advantage of areas where you could in fact develop and not be crowding so much in the front yard and the trash enclosure and so forth. I mean, it's something worth studying to see what the opportunities are there. But it's a project, and it's you've got the. Have you considered making the second floor over the garage actually a larger second floor unit? In other words, expanding the second floor of this building to over the garage, and maybe not having so much space right up to the end of the building. In other words, pulling the second floor back, making this portion an extension of the existing second floor. So instead of it being a one-bedroom upper unit, be a 2 or 3 bedroom upper unit, and therefore have 2 units, 2 parking spaces, but bigger units.
Well, then it wouldn't be an AUD. I mean, that we're here for the AUD, which is to encourage more units.
Affordable.
Yeah,
Okay.
smaller units.
Well, back to square one then. Yeah. This is just seeing if there's other ways to put this on the property. But those are my comments.
So if we could just clarify, Howard, so in terms of your architectural comments, the suggestion was to make it look more like 2 units instead of one more massive building?
Well, I'd say to use the same materials for both buildings.
Okay.
And the other would be to, instead of having the roof mass run into the existing 2-story building, is maybe separate them so they have 2 roofs.
Got it. Thank you. Courtney.
I like Howard's comments related to the architecture, and then in terms of the site plan, it does seem like you're really heavy on the west side and really open on the east, so I know you're limited by your parking, but I'm thinking about pedestrian circulation too, and ways that you could better minimize your property's impact to your neighbor, just to help preserve kind of that openness that exists right now. I know you want to privatize the rear yard or side yard and add a fence there, but I live on a similar street where we have an alley where people kind of park all over, and it's important to try and preserve that sense of shared space, because that Parkway Drive is so narrow. I'll also just add that for the AUD projects, this is actually adequate parking, more than we typically see, because oftentimes we see 2 or 3 bedroom units with 1 parking stall. So if you were able to achieve 1 for each unit, in addition to potentially enough length in your driveways to accommodate guest parking, then that would be double what we've ever seen, I think. So in terms of the parking impact, I think you're in okay shape. I'd be a little bit more concerned with just addressing the neighbor comments and making sure your site plan works with the setbacks.
Okay. Thank you. Courtney.
Amy.
Confusing everyone, including myself.
Happens.
I agree with previous comments. I think if you could break the mass and not have that one large roof connecting to the front, I think that would be favorable. I also think that given your site constraints, given the comments that you've already started to get back from planning, really looking at like a master plan and how you could maybe minimize the impact on that end, because it is getting very tight, especially if you're looking at this photo, if that's where the fence would be. So just giving some relief on that side. And really looking at like functional open space for each unit. That is something that we look at and that we've seen in the AUD projects. So just making sure that that's taken into consideration. Otherwise, I mean, I think there's an opportunity for development. It's just trying to minimize the impacts on neighbors. I think also if you could bring additional photographs the next time on Parkway and then even on the other side, so we have a better sense of the context and what you would be looking at in the second story in the back.
Yes, thanks. David?
I agree with most of the comments that were already said before. I want to appreciate the size that you've looked at with the proposed units and keeping that consistency and not trying to overwhelm. It is a limited site, so I know there's a lot of problems here in terms of trying to resolve these issues. One that I brought up earlier was kind of looking at this Unit A private space and maybe see if there's a potential to relocate that to what you're calling the rear yard right now. And if there's a way to do a direct connection off the existing front Unit A to make that happen, maybe that's a possibility to resolve that, and that frees up this part of the site now for another move, whether it's architecturally or site or landscaping. Another thing I noticed was for Unit B, it seems like they kind of have the longest run for a trash enclosure to access it. So I might explore that a little bit, because it looks like they have to kind of come down here and then come on the sidewalk off Los Olivos and wrap around and then go down Parkway to get back to that point in the rear of the property there. So I don't know, when you move forward with it, that might be consideration of maybe that gets resolved when you start to explore how that unit gets connected. I know there's an existing stairwell right now, so you want to keep that for cost considerations, but if you start to look at how that community sense is obtained, maybe off this elevation, maybe the entry gets relocated over there for the Unit B or something like that to kind of add more interest to that elevation. Right here, I noticed there's like a little pop out with a little roof line that's not shown up on the site plans, but again, maybe there's a gesture when you're starting to look at the whole building. The way I see it right now, this new addition kind of overwhelms the existing building, and the roof lines of the existing residents get kind of overwhelmed and lost. So if there's a way to kind of break up that massing, if you do want to keep the character of the existing building, maybe you look at introducing some of those roof pitches into the new addition. And it starts to read as two complements versus the new addition kind of dwarfing it, and now the existing house kind of looks like it was the one that was added on. So I just say explore roof lines, see if it can be integrated to the existing, explore path of travel for Unit B to the trash enclosure wherever that gets finalized, and possibly looking at relocating Unit A to a different part of the site to fit to conform with standards.
Okay, thanks, David. I think the only comment I would add that I didn't hear was just the little pop-out or pop-up that you have at the addition to make that look like it's more demanded by the architecture by maybe doing a little projection there, so that there's a wall, a little change in wall surface that makes it look like there's a reason why the roof has that little gable end there. Other than that, to me, the proposal seems very acceptable. I can understand the concerns that your neighbors have, and it occurred to me that one way perhaps to address the issue regarding a sense of being your neighbor being imposed on would be to perhaps eliminate some square footage at the second floor right here to allow more light and air to their entrance and their property on that side. It looks like there's maybe a little bit of extra room up there that could be reduced a little. To summarize the comments, When you return, please bring additional photos of the neighborhood so we can get a better sense of the neighborhood. Resolve the outdoor living and trash enclosure issues, and there was a number of suggestions there about how that could be done. The board does like to confirm that the outdoor living space is functional in relation to each unit. So that's something we'd be looking at. There was one board member made the comment and was supported by other board members to try and make it appear as more of the nature of 2 units as opposed to one larger house with a 3-car garage. That could be done with the roof line and maybe other features. And to use the same siding, I guess it was, when you said same materials, you mean the same siding and detailing?
Yeah, I don't know what's the stucco front house, stucco?
No, it's kind of
asbestos.
asbestos. We were planning to re-side everything, but it seems to me that if you want to make them look different, you don't use the same siding on.
Right.
So
Right.
take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what you want to do, make them look different?
Yeah,
Well-
the house needs to be updated.
That was your comment.
Didn't you
I
say
believe
make
that
it
was my comment.
look like 2 units, but give them
Yeah.
all the same siding? So
Yeah.
maybe I need to explore.
Yeah.
A little
I think
different
there's 2 ways to go on that. To me, it doesn't seem like an overwhelming house if it was all one thing. And also, the detailing of that front house is very nice, aspects of it. So I think if you were to use the nicer aspects of that front house and make it, give it continuity by applying the same to the addition, it seems to me that that would be an acceptable approach. But that's just one board member. So I think we need a motion. I think I just listed the items that would be in the motion. Do we have someone who would like to make
I'll make
that?
that
Howard would
motion.
make it. Do we have a seconder?
A second.
Seconded by David. Do we need to go through them again? No? Okay.
Under discussion?
Yes, under discussion.
I would, have you looked at modifications?
No.
So one question would be whether to take the front unit and ask for that, the front yard for that unit to be Los Olivos, and to take the additional unit and ask for the front yard for the additional unit to be Parkway, so that you have 2, you have to get a modification for that. But if you did that, that would allow you to use the existing front yard here where you are facing, I mean, this would be a side yard for the front unit, and this would be a backyard for the back unit. In other words,
Okay.
there's a
Yes.
I think staff needs clarification on what the
Is it, what is
was
the
indefinite continuing.
motion? Is it
Indefinite, yes, indefinite.
Oh, yes, right.
No, that sounds right.
Just, anyway, to look at the possibility of modifications.
All right. So we have a first and a seconder. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, there was some confusion with staff when the first item was heard. There was a memo that needed to be read into the motion.
Okay.
There was one that I had handed out, and I thought you were referring to that one, and that was for a different item. But there is a resident survey that needs to be, so if we could just reopen and make sure that that makes it on to the record.
It's not that.
I'm not sure where that
Yeah,
paper is, Matthew.
it didn't say,
Here it is.
so we need to reopen.
So we're going to reopen item 1 because we needed to include in the motion, the reading into the motion, the annual residence survey. Am I supposed to read this whole thing? You mind?
For informational purposes only, all average unit size density incentive program projects in the medium, high, and high density and priority housing overlay zones shall conduct an annual resident survey and report the following information for each unit to the Planning Division by December 31st of each year for the first 8 years of the project, commencing the year the project receives occupancy clearance. The annual report for each unit shall include net floor area, number of bedrooms, monthly rent or condominium purchase price and utilities, periods of vacancy, household size, current employment, location of each adult resident by zip code, prior employment location of each adult resident by zip code, prior residence, zip code for each adult, number of cars, trucks, and bikes owned by each resident. And please list types of alternative transportation used, if any. At this time, staff requests. The ABR include the condition of approval in the motion for final approval of the project.
You want us to vote on that too? Or do we need to?
That's just.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we're closing item 1, and we are on to item 3, which is 325 West Anapamu Street. This is a project which we've seen at least a couple of times.
5 times.
5 times, thank you. And we have the revised project description. Is that since the last review, or did that happen ages ago?
That project description should be the latest plans.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. This is an AUD project, a proposal to demolish an existing single-family dwelling, detached garage, and shed totaling 4,390 square feet, and to construct a 4,812 square foot 2-story residential apartment building housing 8 rental units. Unit mix will include 8 one-bedroom units ranging in size from 557 to 693, with an average unit size of 600. The density proposed is 37 dwelling units per acre, with a maximum of 63 dwelling units per acre allowed in this parcel. Also proposed are 2,687 square foot carport with 8 parking spaces, 8 covered bicycle parking spaces, and a 144 square foot trash enclosure. No grading is proposed, and there's the removal of 5 trees. So action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. Project requires finding that the project qualifies for an exemption from further environmental review under CEQA. And we're ready to go.
Okay. Brian Cornell, Derek Eichelberger. I think it would be helpful, since we've been here so much, just to take you very quickly through what you have reviewed. And actually, because we've never shown this to you, I wanted to show you a project. This was on the site in 2004 with unit sizes from 1,200 to 1,600 square feet that was approved. Actually, it was a 4-unit condominium project, 3 stories, and that's kind of where we took over. So
when was that?
That was in 2004.
Okay.
So we came to you in April, almost over a year ago, April 25th, 2016. At that time, we had 11 units. Should also make it clear that this site allows 13 units per the AUD standards that could have an average unit size of 811 square feet. And if you were to build 8 units, according to the AUD standards, they could have an average unit size of 970 square feet. We are now at 8 units with 600 square feet of average unit size. So the first project we showed you, I will flip through these. You guys will remember this, where we had 3 stories tapered back to respect the solar ordinance. That was 11 units. We then revised that to a 10-unit scheme where we got rid of the 3 stories. We had 2 units in the front, and all the access was taken off of the alley, which was something that we were fighting for some time, keeping those 2 buildings in the front. In August, we revised it again. It was still 10 units, but we reduced the basic massing in the rear a little bit and provided screening concepts for the neighbors. We then revised it again in January 17 of 2017. At that point, we reduced the project to 9 units. And we also sort of simplified the massing, and one of the concerns all along was the color of the project, which you will see today. I have a very neutral gray. Not that that's the color we're proposing, but I don't want color to be an issue.
So we simplified that. This was the project that we showed you then. And then in March, we reduced again to 9 units, and this was a significant change because at that point we gave up taking access off the alley and agreed to take access off of Anapamu. And the unit sizes reduced as well. So that's the history. One of our neighbors, Sissy Ross, asked me to bring in the computer model of this so that we could kind of fly around it. So I think that that will be beneficial. I will tell you, since you reviewed it back in March, the most significant change really has been Derek's working on the landscape plan. And relative to that, this is our common open space in the middle of that. I'll let Derek explain this in a little more detail a little bit later. Let me go through the model. But that is our open space. We have hedging all along both property lines with trees. And I think with that, I'll just kind of fly you around this quickly, and then we'll complete our presentation. So this is looking from Anapamu. And you can see from this that basically we have that 2-story presence in front. So there are 4 units. This is basically a 4-plex in the front of the building or in the front of the property, and then the driveway that goes back to the rear. This right here is where we would plant that large tree and have that open space, which actually works out to be a nice spot because that's also the connection to the garage, to the front units, and the stair up to the garage. The property to the north, which is Richard and Sissy Ross's property, we're showing consistently along the property lines on both sides a 6-foot fence. It's possible that they may want to have more than 6 feet, which we've agreed to, but that's what I am showing in the model. So you can get a sense of, as we're looking at that, they have a large oak tree in the back of their lot, which is illustrated right here. So I'll kind of try to get around that. But we have tried with this to minimize the openings affecting this little unit right here. We've tried to keep all of the windows up with high sills for additional privacy. And really have been very sensitive to the concerns about visibility onto the property. One of the things since the last review, we actually showed the buildings at 6 feet, and they're required to be 10 feet off the rear. So these lower portions, which are the bike parking and the trash, are set back 6 feet because they are 1-story elements, and then the second story is set back to 10 feet, and then we've recessed it back a little bit further and have a rather small deck. This is only about a 4-foot deep deck, so it's not really an activity space at all, but just an area that gives some additional space to the units. Some of the units have their own private outdoor open space. Some of them do not, but we comply with the common open space requirement. So looking at the other side, our neighbors that are to the south, the intent, again, this is a bedroom window, and we've agreed that we will make that glass, the lower section of glass, translucent so that it won't be a privacy issue. We've kept that sill at 44 inches, which of course is the minimum or the maximum that we can. In order to, again, mitigate privacy so that this bedroom really has high windows and can't look down onto the neighbor. This is just a small bathroom window that is in the unit. And let me back out a little bit here. You can see, again, the continuous nature of that hedge as well as the fence. Let me move this here a little bit. And this is the neighbor who is in the front, and their house And so they obviously are adjoining that driveway area, but basically the same thing is true as far as the plantings to carry on across. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're showing this as just simple gray. I don't really want to delve into the color right now. My intent is for it obviously to be compatible with the neighborhood, but the key aspect of this is that we have sort of the combination of board and bat and a little bit of horizontal siding, and then we have basically what is the smooth plaster elements in the rear of this building that is really acting as the grounding element for the garage portion. So that we can come back to this certainly if any of the neighbors wants to look at a particular vantage point. But we feel that we've done everything possible to mitigate the concerns of the neighbors, not the least of which is agreeing to take that access off of Anapamu. We've tried very hard to keep the buildings simple, but at the same time, we've broken the mass of that roof. So this element, for instance, is raised up to break the length of the roof, but it's also then set back, which allows it to achieve the necessary setback for the solar ordinance. And I think it's really important, and then I'll let Derek explain the landscape plan, and we'll be done with our presentation. 45 feet is what's allowed in this zone, and so you can see where that line is relative to the heights of these buildings. We think that we've scaled the project back significantly and hope that we can finally get approval from you all today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eric to explain a little more detail of the landscaping.
Thank you, Brian. Last time we were here, there were some specific comments. We did have a smaller terrace here, and it was requested that we explore making it bigger, which we've done. I've added a secondary access to this so people come out of the garage and get to this spot. Access is the stairway up here. It's big enough now that it could host a group, or it could be divided and several different people could enjoy it without necessarily being in each other's way. Our previous submittal did not show these trees here. We've added those, and they are the same Callistum and Viminalis, which we are proposing on this side. I thought this picture was appropriate because it really tells the story about sort of the openness and screening ability next to a very tall vertical wall. We had to re-articulate our bioswale / retention basin due to some of the architectural details, but it still is in this general area, and it still, I think, will be able to handle the majority of the stormwater issues as we go through that with the city. And those are the main changes.
And then I mentioned about the open space, and so just to be clear, some of the units, they vary relative to their amount of open space. For example, this unit on the second level doesn't have any private outdoor space. This unit has that 4-foot deep balcony, as I mentioned. The unit here in front has a little balcony. We did this little sort of side-by-side balcony condition where we placed a connecting wall that between them for privacy. And at the ground floor, then, the units that are on the ground have small little outdoor living space in that side yard as well.
Can I just touch on one other thing?
Sure.
I did take a trip with the neighbor east of the property. She was very concerned about the oak tree.
This right here.
Yeah, which
it shows on your plan better, Derek.
It extends over the property line probably 10 to 12 feet, and she was concerned, as she should be, about how that would be affected once construction starts. And we did a visual observation of it, and it is apparent that a number of limbs could be removed without affecting the overall character of the tree and still allowing the limbs to go over the property line, which I think we were both pleased with.
Okay, thanks very much. So I believe you did address
Did we have
the motion
comments?
last time.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and read those. Number one was the board appreciated the reduction of two units and 2 parking spaces since the last review. The board appreciated the redesign efforts that were made to provide access off Anapamu Street rather than the alleyway. Number 3, we asked for enhancements, to study enhancements to outdoor living space, which we saw today. Number 4, continue to work with the neighbors to provide additional landscaping or other means of privacy, specifically along the east and west property lines, which we saw. Number 5, continue to develop the use of trees to screen windows. Number 6, reduce or eliminate the encroachment of the second floor deck on the south elevation to protect the privacy of the neighbor to the west. Number 7, provide a study of what the railing looks like to assure that it fits within the building style. I think we saw that. Number 8, provide a usable porch for the street-facing unit on Anapamu Street. Yep. Okay, so does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it does. I should mention that we did email the plans to the neighbors in advance of this hearing.
By the way, thanks very much for bringing the 3D image in. I think you just set a new standard. It's going to be hard to beat.
I don't know about that. But
Yeah,
at least I was able to hook it up.
All right, so we'll open up public comment. First person on the list here, our little package of commenters, Geoffrey Ravenhill. And everyone gets 2 minutes, and we'll try and be very strict about it.
If you could move
So,
over
just to
to
be
the
fair.
side so
Oh,
that
sure.
we can use the chair there or whichever.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back.
Thank you. I'd like to start just on a positive note that I really appreciate where we stand today, where the project stands today compared to where it was a year ago. There have been a lot of changes, and I think for the better. I still have issues on the size, bulk, and scale, and most importantly on the privacy issues on how it will impact my property. At the last meeting, we talked about the encroachment of the porch on the alley side that actually is outside of the 10-foot setback. So if that could come into the 10-foot setback, it would be flush with that building, and so it wouldn't, basically the people on the porch wouldn't be looking into my living room and into my kitchen. And then 2 iterations ago, we had screening on the 3 windows that look over my property. One of them, as the architect mentioned, is at a 44 sill plate or plate height with frosted glass, but the other 2 are, I believe, bathroom windows. And so kids in my yard will look up at people in bathrooms, and people in bathrooms will look down at kids in my yard. So that's, I mean, with trees in the way, that'll help, but that's a concern. And then lastly, it is the barn in the back has the parking below, and that there's no wall there, and so that's because the bumpers have to stick out into that setback. I would ideally love a wall completely down, but we talked about that, and that basically would kill the project. So what I would request is that wall, and we spoke a little bit about it, is for that wall just to come down a little bit so that the bumpers could still park, but that there'd be some sort of screening so that if I have a fence this way and there's screening coming down, they kind of overlap. So for noise and pollution concerns, it would kind of set a double barrier. So those would be my requests. Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Jeffrey, Mr. Chair, could I just clarify one thing for Jeffrey so that we're clear? There isn't any bathroom windows. I was incorrect. That's a kitchen window.
Okay.
And then the bathroom is on
And
the
there's
interior. So there's a bedroom
And there's
window
another one
and
there, right?
another 2 basically kitchen sink type windows. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Brett Gerwitzman? Zeman? Sorry.
Every time.
If you could restate your name, please.
Brett Gewurtzman. So I want to echo what Jeff said. Thank you for the changes. I think it's hard with these AUD projects in these neighborhoods. You know, there's going to be privacy, mass, bulk, and scale concerns, but they've certainly tried to address it. I just wanted to touch on 2 kind of privacy concerns of mine that have arose in the new plan. One would be the new balconies, so here and here. I couldn't tell from the renderings whether or not there was privacy screening. Obviously, it would be important for the neighbors. If there isn't, we'd request that's added. Second thing is this large window right here, which was added. That's a new feature. My yard is here, so concern would obviously be privacy. Not sure if we could do a similar thing that Jeff's had with glazed on the bottom or not, but those are my two privacy concerns. And then lastly, I know we went neutral color. Although we didn't all love the colors last time, I did like the feature of having different colors for the different buildings. I think that made it look smaller, so I would just suggest that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Baum. And after Ed is Richard Ross. Hello, please have a seat.
Can you see the plan that shows the top, that was the previous page, the top down that shows
Yes.
the whole yard?
That one?
Yes, so.
There's a pointer here if you'd like.
Landscape.
Or do you want to see the landscape plan?
Landscape plan, please. I want to thank echo the thanks of previous neighbors who appreciate the ongoing process and you working with us and continuing to try to make this be compatible with the neighborhood. I've spoken in the past about bulk and scale, but today I'm specifically here to speak for a certain tree that I believe is right here. It's about a 50-foot high honey locust tree. I think you have it as a Latin name on some plan that I... Robinia. Deciduous, so it loses leaves in the winter, very lush and green today, native to North America. It's a gorgeous feature of our neighborhood, and it's almost right on the end of the lot. And I just think, if at all possible, to spare the life of that tree. It not only adds beauty to the neighborhood and shade, but where I live is the small unit here. I've been a tenant of the Rosses for 24 years. I work from my home, and that tree directly shades the slant of my roof there. I believe if it's gone, I'm going to get direct sun hitting that roof line, and my house is going to be a lot hotter. I think I see you're going to plant some trees here, but they're not going to get 50 feet high anytime soon. So I just wanted to quickly read two sentences from the ABR guidelines. Section 4, tree and vegetation preservation. Development should be sensitive to existing mature trees as they are a valued community resource. Mature trees should be integrated into the project design rather than removed. So please, if at all possible, consider working around that large mature tree. It's completely naturalized, which means it's lush green without anybody watering it. It's even through our drought, it was completely lush and healthy.
Sir, your time is up.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you for considering that.
Thank you. Richard Ross. And after Richard is Sissy Ross.
Thank you. I will also join a small chorus and grudgingly concede that it's a lot better. It's unfortunate that it's taken us 5 meetings and somewhat of an adversarial position to get here. I think size, bulk, scale is still really difficult. I think the solution has been improved on the south side. A lot of it has been moved onto the north side, which is basically our elevation. There's very little breakup. It pushes in, it pushes out a little bit. It tops up, but to me, I'm looking at a massive architectural structure that goes from Anapamu to the back alley. And I don't have the solution. Great that it went from 11 units to 8. I wonder how appropriate the AUD is in terms of Brian saying, well, we could have had 16, it really, I don't see that's a logical argument at this point. But I will thank Brian to getting to this point.
Okay, thank you. Sissy Ross.
I also want to thank the architect and the landscaper, especially for going to the project with me and like walking around and actually figuring out what might happen with my oak tree. I think that the trees that are proposed, especially by Ed's unit, are really helpful. All this is really improved. There's a hedge here too that's, I hope, will be a sound buffer. This, folks are going to be here. There's some stuff we can do on our side to alleviate that, but I don't know if you all have any ideas for it's going to have a nice fence, but I'm not sure how to buffer the sound. Derek had a suggestion. I'd like the fence to be as high as possible, and he suggested having, a 6-foot fence? And then a lattice on top of that? It's difficult for us who are not professionals to come up with the solutions to these problems. But I felt like I entered into a collaborative situation about our oak tree, which made me happy.
Great, thank you. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the board on this project? Okay, so we'll close public comment and we'll go to questions. Howard, any questions?
A couple, just little questions. Looking at sheet A201, north elevation, and this is apparently a section elevation through the gap between the buildings, and looking at the two-story building in the back. That's this one right there.
Yep, that
So
is a section.
I see a little parapet above the sloped roof. That is, what is that little parapet?
That is just it is a little flat roof area that we were going to bring. We don't show it here, but we were basically, it just became a solution for the roofing for this little living area and allowed for it to be a little bit higher space because it's interior to this. So that's really what it is. It was just to create some roof interest back in this little courtyard entrance area.
Okay. And the, what is the finish of the concrete?
Well, what I would like it to be is just a beautiful, smooth finish.
Smooth gray, warm gray.
Warm gray.
Concrete.
Finish.
No further questions.
Okay. Amy.
Were you able to address the front porch at the front building on Anapamu?
Well, we didn't, I don't know that Derek showed it as, he's not showing it as a larger porch. There's no reason we can't make that a bigger porch, but we are limited to how much we can encroach into that setback. So we don't have a lot of space, but there's no reason why we can't go ahead and pave that area.
Okay. Yeah, so you could have
So it
like a
basically
chair
aligns with
table.
the roof above.
Right. Okay. And then I think one of our other comments was about the railing.
We have not, really, right now what we're showing is frankly a pretty traditional vertical rail, so I haven't detailed that. We obviously will come back to you with the detail of that, but the intent is for it to be a traditional vertical rail.
Okay. And then I I guess clarification on that, on the porch, this porch at the back. I thought when you presented, you'd said that you pulled it back?
Well, we ended up basically, this unit, because we had to push this back to 10 feet, it became a little smaller, as you can see. So we didn't want to encroach any more into the unit. And, you know, ideally, a balcony, a little porch like that, or a balcony would be 6 feet. So the 4 feet is kind of minimal.
Right.
I do not believe, you know, I understand what Jeffrey is saying, but I don't believe that someone's going to stand here and be able to look into his living room. You know, it's really just, I'm trying to get as much space out of that as possible. If we bring it back to the wall, then I would probably at that point just eliminate it altogether.
Right. Where, I guess in the site plan, where's the building over here?
That shows right here. So you can see his footprint. And so that balcony then, if I, let me just make sure I'm showing this correctly, yeah. So the wall above is, the window, or the wall above is here. It steps back at the living room and then juts out. So basically that 2-foot extension of balcony is right here looking, you know.
Okay. But there's like three trees.
Yes, there is a tree that's here and in there. So that tree really would effectively be the buffer.
Okay. And then, I know the screening for parking, that, I know a few iterations ago, you kind of explored that. Is that's totally eliminated, right?
Well, you know, we did not, because we've really been concentrating kind of on the site and the landscaping, we didn't show it, but I have no problem with the concept of adding, you know, similar to what, if I can pull this iteration out, it's back probably, I'm gonna guess it's somewhere in here. You know, we had this sort of screening shown.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason why we couldn't do a layer of screening that would come down a little bit lower, that would still allow airflow through it. So it could be a similar kind of a horizontal siding like this, which would sort of pick up where we're introducing some of the horizontal siding just for some material break. That's a possibility.
Okay. And then just the tree in the back, I think it was this one, right? That you guys, yeah. Is it that one?
That
back
is
there?
it, yes.
And that one's just going to be removed, not relocated, or?
I doubt it could be removed, or relocated, it's pretty large.
I mean, the only thing that we could do is we could certainly agree to attempt to save it. I would want to have an arborist, you know, our arborist weigh in on how it would be impacted by this footing. This is just a one-story portion here, so technically we could probably minimize this footing, and the main footing line really is back at that 10-foot line.
Right.
So it's possible, and obviously it's right now up against the paving of the alley. So it's something we'd be willing to try to save. But obviously, we are putting another, you know, it's important to note that we have, you know, a fairly large tree.
Right,
you know,
that you're putting
right
in there.
There, so I don't know whether those two would compete or not, but, you know, I understand if there was a way to save it, we'd certainly be willing to try.
Okay. And then the last question is just the two, any screening for those two decks that were up?
Yeah, can we switch the monitor back to me real quick? Because I've got that view. See if this works.
Oh, I don't think we're connected.
Oh, I came unconnected here, sorry. There we go. So there is that balcony. This is that privacy wall between the two balconies. So I suppose we could, put some kind of a lattice screen or something, up there, but.
But you also have that tree in the foreground.
Yeah, the tree's
there is
right
the
there.
large tree right
Yeah.
there, so.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
All
Those
right.
were all my questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. David?
Could you quickly kind of point out, maybe in plan, where those locations on the second level of the glazing that you're proposing to have be opaque are?
Well, the main one was here opposite Jeffrey's house, so that lower section of that window would be that way. We didn't change the plans, but when we met with Sissy on Monday, we agreed, or last week, we agreed that we would do the same thing with this window here. This is a living room window, which in elevation, again, we set that up even higher, I'm pretty sure, than the normal sill height. So you can see that window's already set as a high window. But that's where we show that opaque, the opaque concept. We could theoretically do the same thing with this kitchen window here.
By opaque,
say
you
you're
mean
gonna-
translucency?
Yeah, by have it,
Translucent.
put a film or something on it so that you get the light, but you can't really see through it.
Did you say that you were going to raise this? Is that what you were just talking about?
Well, no,
That
this
sill?
one is raised above. This is at 44 inches, I'm pretty sure, but
Okay.
we certainly could do that translucency on those windows there also.
Okay. And then I'm noticing on the elevations, I don't remember from the last time if it was on here, but there's some introduction of horizontal siding in certain faces of the building on the second level. And that's just to bring a little bit more interest to the elevations.
Yeah, I mean, it's traditional to have that kind of combination of board and bat and horizontal. We're not doing it much.
Yeah, it's very sparse.
Yeah.
And then the last couple times I was asking about the garage and the openness that you have, at the ground level there, minus the landscaping that's proposed. Have you guys taken any of those suggestions about looking into what you would need for your required open space for ventilation to be met so you can naturally ventilate it?
Well, yeah, I am relying on naturally ventilating it, but as I mentioned, I think that we could have some louvered elements here that would reduce that height and I'd still meet my requirements for natural ventilation.
Okay. And then the last question on the south elevation, the two forms that I think are the trash enclosure and the bike storage, they pull off the building just by a couple of feet, right? Off that second floor elevation?
By 4 feet. You can see that here on the east elevation. You can see what that difference is.
The deck does, but at the second level, it's only maybe a couple feet, right? Off that.
No, it's
from there to there?
it's 4 feet from the face of the where the doors are into the bike and the trash to the wall beyond. The balcony is 2 feet proud of the wall beyond.
And then push back. Is that top going to be like a little parapet with like a well that's dropped down, or is it just going to be flush at the top and then roll back to the building?
My intent was actually for that to potentially just be open air for ventilation.
Ventilation.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. No further questions.
Okay. I don't have any questions, so we'll go to comments. Howard?
I really have to compliment the architect and consultants for doing the yeoman's job with this and whittling this project down and reaching out to the neighbors, and it's a sincere effort. Not everyone's going to be pleased, neighbors, but this is a very good project, and I appreciate that the architect has removed colors from our deliberations so that we are looking at this just really as form, mass, shadow, shading, and form and light. This is, we can take action on this if sufficient information is provided. And I think we have the information, and I, for one, am going to support PDA. This project is ready for PDA.
Okay, thanks, Howard.
Yeah, I agree with Howard's comments. I think this project has come a long way, and I think that with the articulation of the roof in the back, I think that it's helping sort of break that long mass, and I think that a lot of the privacy issues have been addressed. I think that there's a few, and just looking at like maybe screening some of the parking by extending the siding down a bit more, so there's sort of an overlap with the fence. I would encourage you to study that, but to study it in a way that it's integrated into the building and not just sort of like applied, stuck on to the outside, just so that it's part of the mass. And I think extending the paving for that front porch for the Anapamu elevation, I think that's going to also help it read with the other single-family houses that are on that street, just to have that presence and to have some useful, functional open space. And also for taking a look at possibly keeping the tree in the back of the property, if it's feasible, because it is such a large tree and it's been there for a while. But I think overall, I could support the project design approval and look forward to just more of the details, how it's all coming together. I support looking at different colors so the buildings read as kind of different structures, which will also help break up the mass. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. David?
I agree with my fellow board members. I think there's been a lot of effort that's been taken on not just the architecture, but the space planning and the landscape to get the project to where it is today. I know that's not an easy process, so I think overall it reads a lot better now. The roof lines, I think, are very well articulated. I have no issues with the roof decks as proposed. There's been a pretty good amount of consideration, not just within the units from one to another, but also to the adjacent properties. So I really appreciate that. If there's a potential to keep that existing tree, I would encourage that, especially if that trash enclosure is already open, above anyways. That seems like it is kind of it's secure with walls, but it's not open to above. So I think there's an opportunity there to kind of maybe filter that a little bit more with the architecture to see if that can get resolved a little bit better to keep that root system there. The two issues, so mass bulk and scale, I have no issues with. It's well designed, roof lines are there, the consideration of privacy with the adjacent neighbors is all met. I have two issues with compatibility still right now. One of them is just the garage door at the back, because I still don't know how that's going to get regulated, that will be locked and that the garage door is not going to be used as whether it's an entrance or exit to this property. I've driven down this alleyway a couple times during different times of the day in the last couple of months to kind of get a feel for what's happening there, and it is a very narrow alleyway, so I do have concerns about adding to that safety element. There's a tree there and so forth, so I think that creates some issues that I don't know how to get resolved yet. So if there's a proposal that gets integrated into the design to address that issue, I would be okay with that, but at this point I don't see that. The second issue is just the openness of the parking garage. I think if you guys can explore that, again, integrating, like Board Member Tripp mentioned, with the integration of architecture versus just adding on landscaping. I live in a situation that's similar to this, where there's a neighbor who turns on their car, within a couple minutes, our house smells of odor. So I'm just trying to see if there's an opportunity to bring in some architecture, whether it's 4 or 5 feet of solid wall that directs the odors upwards, and then keeping it open. But again, I recognize the issue that ventilation, to meet that naturally, you guys can easily do that. So if you can maybe explore that and see what the minimum requirement is to meet your natural ventilation, and work with the architecture to kind of enclose that openness of the parking garage a little bit more, I would support that too. But overall, I think you guys have made tremendous efforts to get to this point.
Okay, thanks. Do I hear a majority of the board would support different colors for the main masses, the two main masses of the building, and the third one for the plaster?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Plaster, you mean the concrete?
Plaster.
I think it's going to be
Well,
plaster.
I just heard it represented as plaster.
Well,
Is it
I'd love
concrete?
for it to be concrete. We're going to try and do concrete.
I see.
It could get value engineered out, in which case it still would be a
Okay,
smooth
I understand.
plaster.
Yeah.
Okay. So the motion would be project design approval, indefinite continuance, with the following comments. Board appreciates the changes made since the last review and the continuing of working with the neighbors to modify and remodel the design to be more compatible with their concerns. Provide a larger porch at the front main entrance for first floor. Provide some sort of additional screening at the ceiling of the carports, of the carport area, to provide additional visual relief to the neighbors. Study the possibility of keeping the tree at the south end. Although I would comment that there is another very much larger tree, which has an enormous canopy that looks like it's integrating with that tree. So I'm not sure the loss of it is really going to be that substantial.
You want the one in the driveway?
The
one in the driveway?
The loss of the one that's shown being removed now.
But there's a big one in the driveway.
There's a big one right across the alley.
Alley.
Yeah, yeah. Board would support using alternate or different colors for the two main masses of the building, along with a third color for the solid plaster or concrete surfaces. So I would make that motion. I need a seconder.
I'll second.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chair, could you read these?
Yes, we can.
guidelines
Thank you.
as well as announce the 10-day appeal period?
Yes. So this project qualifies for CEQA exemption 15183. Do I need to read more than that? You want all the words?
Yes, please.
The ABR
Mr. Chair.
finds that the project qualifies for an exemption from further environmental review under CEQA guidelines, section 15183, based on the city staff analysis and CEQA certificate of determination on file for this project. So we have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, guys.
One opposed.
One opposed.
Can I make a discussion point? Why? So it's
Okay,
clear to
sure.
the applicant.
Sure.
Just issues with the openness of the garage in terms of smoke and odor for compatibility of the neighborhood, and that the rear garage door would contribute to a safety hazard.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
could you please announce the 10-day appeal period?
That's right. So there's a 10-day appeal period on this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This one's not the same.
Are you working with them?
That's more accurate. This isn't the same. That's not the same.
This one had an error on this.
So we're on to item 4, 2017 Bath Street. This is a new item. Proposal for the conversion of a single-family residence into a short-term rental. Project is comprised of conversion of a 1,260 square foot, one-story, three-bedroom, single-family residence into a commercial hotel floor space. Exterior changes include the replacement of a 951 square foot gravel driveway with permeable pavers and the removal of a driveway gate at the northeast property line. No changes are proposed for the existing structures. Project requires development plan approval findings. And this is continued from the consent agenda to the full board from April 24th hearing. And we also would need to, the project requires development plan approval findings as well as findings that the project qualifies for an exemption under CEQA. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. Your name, please?
Drew Rudman.
Hi, Drew.
I'm the owner of the property.
Okay. And if you could walk us through a description of what it looks like now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, actually, first I'd kind of like to start just a little history of the property, if I might.
Okay, all right.
So we purchased the property in 2013. It was purchased as a vacation home for ourselves and our family, and eventually to be a retirement home for us. My family and I have been coming to Santa Barbara for close to 2 decades as a favorite spot to visit. We have a lot of friends, family in the extended area. When we came into some money in 2013, we decided to look for a vacation home for ourselves that eventually we could retire to and retire to the area. And so the property was initially purchased for that purpose. And then we looked into, we're only going to be able to use it 5-6 times a year. It'd be nice to be able to rent it out when we weren't using it. So we investigated the zoning regulations in Santa Barbara and determined that R4 zone, a zone that actually provided for that type of usage. So we limited our search to that zone. We located the property at 2017 Bath and purchased it, and spent 3 or 4 months developing the project, fixing it up, and setting it up as a vacation home, and eventually we'd start renting it out. We licensed ourselves to the city of Santa Barbara. We filed all paperwork with them. We collected all transient occupancy tax, and operated as such. And then fast forward a few years later, we've come to find out, they've begun to enforce zoning regulations, and there's this little known use conversion process that you need to go through in order to actually obtain a proper permit for this. And we began that process early part of last year, middle of the year, when we were made aware of it. And then we've met with the city and gone through the planner console, and we've ended up here. So as the property stands right now, we're requesting very few changes. I mean, through that process, we've come to find out from feedback from transportation. There's a couple of requested changes to the property. The conversion of the driveway, which is currently gravel-based, they wanted a more hard surface there. So we consulted with transportation and the small streams division in terms of permeability of that surface, and did our research there and have discussed developing that driveway in a means consistent with the small, the Tier 3 stormwater caveats. And then the other thing that was requested is that there's an existing gate on the front part of the property. They asked us to remove that, which is very simple to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the current layout of the property. You see that we have a long drive here. This is currently all gravel. And the garage, detached garage in the back, single car garage. And they've requested the replacement of this and then the removal of this gate. These are photos of the surrounding neighborhood. I guess maybe an overview. So I can just give you an idea of where we sit. Kind of surrounded by high-density housing. This property here is, I believe, low-income housing, maybe Section 8, I think.
You have a picture of that?
Yeah, probably somewhere here. So this is what it
Two-story?
looks like. It's a single story, actually.
Okay.
Right here. This is our property,
Mhm.
and that is that.
Okay.
And then on our right is an apartment complex. I'm not sure how many units there are. And
One or two-story?
Two-story.
Two-story.
Kind of towers over us a little bit. You can see that here. Our property's here.
Okay.
And then, so that's our side of the street. Across the street, it's mostly, this is kind of the way it sets up. So this is looking towards Mission, right across the street, and then towards this direction. It's mostly single-family, single-story property.
Okay. And then the changes that you're proposing?
We're not making any changes to the layout or structure of the house or the dwelling. We're simply been asked to remove the gravel driveway.
Okay.
Install a harder surface, and to remove this gate up front.
Okay. All right. Well, does that complete your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. We may have questions for you, but we've got to go through public comment, and then we'll raise our questions and comment. Yeah. All right. So we have several speaker slips here. Everyone gets 2 minutes, and your time doesn't start until you're sitting and you're comfortable and the microphone is on. Joe Rushin. I'm guessing at names here, so if mispronounced, please restate your name when you come up.
Take this, there's more space over
Hi,
here.
Joe.
Either one. He's
Okay, the last time we were here, the point was made that this is just a single unit. Is it
It's
not?
on. Yes, you're good.
And so what's the big deal about a single unit? Well, anybody who's been paying attention realizes that the city pays dearly to get even a single unit of modest housing created in terms of incentives and relaxation of development standards and so forth. So it's not a throwaway, this just being a single unit. The other thing is, this is a residential neighborhood here, and it's a vulnerable neighborhood that can either improve or deteriorate. And it certainly doesn't need the destabilizing influence of transit occupancy. And those are my only comments.
Okay. Thanks very much. Bonnie Freeman. Either chair is fine.
I couldn't hear anyone speaking, so I'm a little...
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I couldn't hear you, and I couldn't hear the other person. So I don't know if this is working right. Okay.
Probably weren't close enough to the microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I live in the neighborhood. I walk my dog past the house every day, that street, and all the surrounding streets. Parking is a main problem. All the side streets are filled during the day with all kinds of medical stuff. And I myself am concerned about preserving housing stock and also character of the neighborhood. I realize that I'm in R2. I'm a block from Cottage Hospital. But I have to walk maybe 2 or 3 blocks at night late to find a parking spot if I know I have a guest coming the next day so they can park in my one parking spot. So that's an issue. I also moved here a couple years ago from unincorporated, and I know it's a different zoning thing, but part of the reason was our community was inhabited by 1 and then turned into 8 short-term rentals, and it just ruined the character of our neighborhood. Everybody is conflicted and don't talk to each other, and it's a lawsuit, and it just changed the character of a nice small community. And one of the reasons I love where I live is because it's sort of a historic district, and it has a mixture of people, but you get too many commercial elements in there, and it just is going to change. And we want to hold on to the values of character. And so I'm opposed to, a conversion to commercial when we're already stressed to the limit.
Okay, thank you. Natalie Giovanni. Natalia.
You'll get it.
No, I doubt it.
Good afternoon. Is this thing? Oh, it is. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you. Chair and board members. What does it mean to be consistent with the principles of sound community planning? I think the right approach is to look to the general plan and specifically the housing element. The goals and policies that were selected in a long collaborative process and then approved by our elected officials. It has been thoroughly vetted. It is the best guide you have to what, in Santa Barbara, are principles of sound community planning. And within these documents, housing is paramount. It is not the only priority, but it is clearly an important priority, perhaps the highest priority. So that, I believe, should be your guide to deciding whether an application to remove permanently a housing unit in favor of a commercial use is consistent with the principles of sound community planning. You have heard evidence. You have heard arguments. You have heard opposition from the neighborhood. In the end, you must feel comfortable making the finding that removing this housing unit is sound community planning. If you do not feel comfortable agreeing with that finding, then you must vote no on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Marie Gott.
Chair and board members, my name is Anna Marie Gott, and I am obviously very concerned with housing. I have brought two different homes, this will be the third, to the two different boards, the HLC and the ABR, because of the development plan approval finding that you must make. This, unlike the other two homes, is in an R4 zone. And if you take a look at actually our ordinances and look at the legislative intent of our municipal code for R4 zones, you will actually see, if you've read my letter, a section that I've pulled out. And it starts with, this is a hotel, motel, multiple resident district in which the principal use of land is intended to be for multiple housing, together with recreational, religious, and educational facilities required to serve the community. It goes on further to say that it is the intent of the district to allow hotels and similar establishments, including related recreational conference center and other auxiliary uses, primarily for use by hotel guests. Okay? But more importantly, it says, while protecting the existing housing stock and to preserve the residential character of those neighborhoods which are still primarily residential. This neighborhood right now is primarily residential. You received a second letter from me. I walked the neighborhood. I went to the homes on either side of the property. I went across the street. I went around the corner. I knocked on everyone's door that was home, and I left flyers for them. Some of them called me back, some of them emailed me, and others talked to me personally. I had 17 people that wanted me to let you know that they do not want this unit of housing to be removed from the housing stock. This is a residential neighborhood, and it isn't until about 2.5 to 3 blocks away that it actually becomes commercial use up the street towards Cottage. And there is, right down the street, a 122 room suite with the Best Western Inn. They have apartments if someone, wants to bring their family to Santa Barbara. They have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments with all of the facilities, including a swimming pool, recreation rooms, and weightlifting and a restaurant. So previously, I have documented for you that the average vacancy rate in the city of Santa Barbara for hotel vacancy over the course of the last 4 years has been 24.38%. When I spoke with the owner of the Best Western, she confirmed that hers was roughly the same. So when you look at that and you compare to what we actually have here in Santa Barbara, which our residential vacancy rate for a sustained period of time has been well under 1%. It's very, very clear that we need housing, and it is very, very clear that we do not need an additional hotel room. More importantly, the applicant has failed to say that his garage is filled with an arcade games that don't allow anyone to actually put a vehicle in the a vehicle in the garage. I went last night to actually look at, the neighborhood, and it's completely overparked. I've spoken with people that live across the street. They have indicated that there are numerous short-term rental people arriving at the home very, very frequently, arriving at different days, staying for different lengths of time with multiple cars. Too many cars to actually park, even tandem parking, at that particular location. There's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. It's not just that this gentleman has a home that is in a zone that can be turned into a hotel. The question really is it consistent with the principles of sound community planning when we have so much evidence that what our community and our neighborhoods and what our neighbors are asking for is more housing opportunities, not more opportunities for hotels. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Anna Marie Gott was given extra time because 2 other folks gave their time to her. All right, so we'll close public comment and we'll go to questions from the board. Howard, any questions?
What is the use of the house right now?
Right at this moment, it's empty. I mean, it's families using it occasionally. I mean, we've complied with the prohibition as we work through this process. We use it quite a bit. Prior to that, I'm sorry.
One moment, Mr. Chair. Could you please can you reopen public comment and acknowledge the emails in your packet from people who haven't been present to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I guess we need to sort through this. Have you looked at this? You have?
Yeah, I've tried to dig through this very thick stack of letters and emails that we received today, and I'd just like to make a comment to the general public. We really appreciate your comments, but we often get these the day of the meeting, so we don't have enough time to read through, a 10-page document the day of the meeting. So if there's any way that you can get them to us earlier, we'd have some more time to dig through them. I did read through this, and there's, I think, 5 emails in opposition from different people, as well as the letter from Anna Marie Gott that also indicates about 17 additional people from the neighborhood who are in opposition as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, staff was advised to send one mass email the morning of with public comment.
Right.
And that is
generally not this quantity. That's all.
That's definitely something we can change protocol for, and we can have a conversation about that later. But that's just for the public's knowledge as well.
Yeah.
The reason you received them the morning of is that was the protocol
we
set
asked
in
for.
place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So that's the gist of it. There are letters from the Housing Authority and there was one other group. And then some minutes from the city council and planning commission.
Having to do with,
Short-term rentals, but they're from, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
prior to the findings that were made that indicated the new ordinance. So, just background.
uh-huh. And I know there was a lot of discussion about the elimination of the opportunity for short-term rentals to be allowed in the city, but this is a particular zone in which it is allowed.
They've recently decided to allow short-term rental conversions in the R4 and C2 zones, maybe staff.
Mr. Chair, perhaps I should clarify.
Clarify.
So the ordinance regarding hotel or short-term rental use has not changed. It's been in place in the way it is today since the early 1980s. So at any point in time, someone could have come forward to request to convert a house to a short-term rental or to build a new hotel. They're treated the same. What changed somewhat recently, although it's been 2.5 years now, or year and a half, was council provided additional money to staff to proactively enforce illegal short-term rentals. And we went through a priority list, and our first priorities were to enforce against those operating in single-family zones, and then carried out through to the more intensely zoned properties to now where we have essentially been through all zones and provided some type of enforcement action against those that we've been able to confirm. So that's where it's perceived as a shift or a change in ordinance, but actually nothing changed in the regulations. It was just that staff was given additional money to go and enforce against those that were operating illegally.
Okay. And is there, has Planning Commission or City Council expressed viewpoints about the conversions that are possible? Has there been a discussion about changing that aspect of the ordinance?
There was a discussion in the summer of 2015, and at that time, council declined giving staff direction to change the ordinance.
Okay.
So our direction, as we've been taking it, is if you receive applications, you apply the current regulations, and applicants must go through the process to convert these.
Okay, well, I wasn't here when the first one came through the board at the last hearing, and there's very little of architectural concern here. This is just a driveway being repaved. So it's asking us to make a determination on something other than aesthetics, because there's no aesthetic issues here. So I feel like I need more information. And what is this something? Is this a boilerplate thing that's going to come? Are we going to be seeing more of these? And what's the criteria for deciding whether or not it's appropriate or sound planning? What's the criteria?
Mr. Chair, can I just quickly weigh in? Because neither you nor Howard were at the last meeting, but we did kind of go through all of this. So
Okay.
maybe one of us can help elaborate on the discussion at the last meeting.
What was said, please?
Yeah.
One thing I was going to actually, when we got through questions, I was going to have staff reiterate, because the main question that I asked the last time that weighed on my decision was, or that staff mentioned, was that if this is converted to a commercial property, it cannot be brought back to a residential property.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true for this parcel also?
That's not necessarily true for this parcel. It was true for 812 Jennings because
Okay.
it's in an M1 zone where residential uses are no longer allowed. So
Okay.
that conversion, if that were to be successful, could not be ever converted back to residential use. This one potentially could. It's hard to say what regulations would be in place at some point in the future when an owner may want to convert it back to a residential use. But as you're aware, there are many other development standards for single-family homes that they would have to meet if they wanted to cease using this as a short-term rental.
Right.
So there's no guarantee that it could be converted. Just there's very little guarantee. And
Well, but this house is currently, prior to the current owner, was being used as a single-family residence.
correct.
So you're saying if they change it now and they go back, they would have to meet current setbacks and other ordinance standards for a new single-family dwelling?
Exactly,
Ah,
exactly. And that's
okay.
where, as we're advising other applicants of these proposals, we are finding that there are many existing homes that are non-conforming to setbacks or open yard, and that's fine. They can continue to be non-conforming as a home. Once they convert to a commercial use, to convert it back, then they may need modifications to convert it back
I see.
to a house.
Okay.
So that was.
That's helpful.
Yeah, that was something that we talked about in the last, was the priority of housing
Yeah.
for the city.
Uh-huh,
So-
okay.
We also, just quickly, we discussed parking.
Yeah.
You know, the priority that we've had regarding new housing units with the AUD program. And the real sticking point, you know, for a lot of these is that we're required to make the development plan findings, which is not typical for our board. And so we're really, you know, serving as more of an advisory planning role for this
Yeah.
particular project and others. And we've seen, I think, 2 or 3 now that have come through consent that we've been referring to the full board. And that's one of the findings, is that we need to say that this is consistent with principles of sound community planning.
Yep.
So that's really been the crux of it.
Yeah.
Okay. That helps a little bit. Howard?
So my understanding of this project is it is basically to change a driveway and remove a gate. That's what we're looking at. The other things have to do with planning and the residential, vacation rental, et cetera. Those are not architectural things.
Right.
However, in this instance, we are required to make a finding that states that this project complies with sound community planning.
We have.
So in this particular case, we are acting as planning commission in a way.
Is this typical now for all vacation rentals coming forward?
Yes.
Many
It
of them
seems like it
have
is.
required the same set of findings.
This is
Okay.
specific for ones that are over 1,000 square feet, which require development plan approval findings.
I can't hear what you're saying.
You're seeing this item because their request is to convert more than 1,000 square feet to a non-residential use. So it's that threshold for development plan findings that go to design boards. If it were over 3,000 square feet, it would go to the planning commission for this
I understand.
finding.
I understand.
And I think Howard might be asking because we had another project on today's consent calendar that was less than 1,000 square feet, therefore did not require the findings. And, you know, that was new for him today.
So we are the planning commission.
Essentially.
Yep. Okay, so are we going back to questions now?
Yes, you're on.
So this is your single-family residence.
Correct.
Your garage is full.
Well, it's not full. I mean, it's being used as a makeshift game room right now. But, I mean, we're talking 3 arcade games that can be removed.
So you have a one-car garage on the property.
Yes.
Do you have a space to park another car there without blocking the access to your one car?
No, it is tandem parking.
Tandem parking.
Correct.
Okay, and you are, this is 1,260 square feet. Are you in the R4 zone?
Yes.
Okay, and you're on Bath Street.
Correct.
Okay. No more questions.
Okay. Courtney?
So the idea is that this is an investment for you right now, and then in the future you'll retire here? Is that what I heard?
Correct, yeah. It's sort of an investment. It's a vacation home. We visit and use it 6 or 7 times a year, spend a week here in the summer and 3-4 weekends during the year and other times. And then the eventual plan is to retire here, to move here permanently. We can't do that right now with kids in school and so forth and so on. So it makes it difficult to move here currently, but the plan has always been to eventually move here.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay. Amy?
Have you met with any of like the neighbors or anything as far as?
Yeah, I'd like to discuss that actually. You know, I have met with the neighbors. I'm at the house quite a bit, and I've talked to the people in the lower income housing. I know the landlord there. There's a lot of turn in the neighborhood, to be honest with you. Like, all of our neighbors across the street have circled over at least twice since we've been there. And then, in the apartment complex next to us, there's a lot of turnover.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say turnover, you mean houses being sold? And
They're rentals, I believe. They're long-term rentals.
Okay.
And tenants come and go.
Okay.
So they've switched a lot. The low-income housing actually has been pretty consistent. And the apartment complex to our right is a lot of turnover as well. So I haven't really met too many people there. There's a few people behind us, that I've met, mostly to ask to refrain from making a lot of noise. So for the most part, I've talked to a lot of people in the neighborhood. I actually find it interesting that she talked to 17 people who had a problem with it. And I find it also interesting that not one of those persons submitted an email comment or appeared here. So I find that kind of interesting. And then, they're talking about this being a residential neighborhood, yet in the same breath, 2 blocks or block down is the Best Western.
Right.
So this is a very mixed-use neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Cottage Hospital is not too far away. There is a mixture of commercial, hotels, bed and breakfasts, and these high-density housing units. And there's appears to be a student housing as well. I also, some of these numbers that have been offered up in terms of occupancy are questionable as well. So,
no, we'll just bring it back to my original question. That's all right. I was just curious how. If you had gotten in touch with anyone.
We've been doing it for 3.5 years.
Okay.
We've had no complaints. We've had no police calls or anything like that, other than our guests occasionally contacting us about loud neighbors. Okay. Mainly because they're upset because we're holding them to a high standard to not disturb the neighbors. Not being outside after 10 o'clock, not making noise, not disturbing neighbors, and they're a little irritated that we hold them to that standard and neighbors in our neighborhood not necessarily held to the same standard. But like I said, had absolutely no problems, no questions.
Okay, thanks. That was all I had.
This is a question for planning. This is a question for planning, actually. You touched on it a little bit. If they were going to convert, let's say they go through the process of a short-term rental and they want to go back, somebody wants to go back later and convert it back to a single-family residence. Aside from meeting open space, setbacks, things like that, are there any additional criteria that a short-term rental would have to meet that's different than a typical process of permitting?
Commonly, when we're talking about development standards, it's typically setbacks, open yard, parking would remain the same. 2 spaces. They have 1 credit for non-conforming parking space on the site, so that continues to apply. It carries forward for the short-term rental because this unit with 3 bedrooms would require, per the code, 3 parking spaces. Going back to a house, it would have to have 2. Those are the primary development standards that we've been looking at when we're advising people about the potential consequences they may face if they want to convert it back to a house.
And I know this is out of your purview, but maybe you've weighed in from planning side. Is the 1 covered and 1 uncovered meeting their parking in tandem back out? Is that meeting the requirements for tandem as well?
It is. Covered parking is not required for hotel use, so that aspect of it's meeting. And I understand that transportation planning staff has reviewed the plan and has found it satisfactory to have tandem arrangement here.
Okay, thank you. And for the applicant, how long do people who rent out this rental, how long do they typically stay?
It's a minimum of 2 nights, but typically averages a week in the summertime and usually weekends during the off season. I mean, 3 day. We try to do 3 day weekends, okay, and weeks during the summer.
And I guess going back to planning, there's an email that was sent to us. That's attachment 3, and in it they address the the fact that there was a settlement reached with this property recently because they were advertising for times that were less than 30 days. Is that something you can speak on, or do we have any knowledge of what's going on here with this?
I can speak in generality because we don't typically divulge too much information about enforcement actions, but this property was a subject of enforcement action for operating a short-term rental. We do have an agreement on file from the owner that says that we make them cease operation immediately. Even if they do intend to go through the process to convert legally, we make them stop renting for less than 30 consecutive days, and we have a signed agreement from the owner that they would do that until they get approval and all the valid permits in place.
Okay. Thank you. And have you been abiding by those in the last 30 days?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Comments? Howard?
Tough. I look at these pictures and I see this perfectly charming. I like the gravel driveway you have. I think it's whatever the enforcement is, I think should change. With regard to sound community planning, I take off one hat and put on another and say, if you do this and the next person does this and 50 people do this, we're going to end up with a community of vacation rentals, and we won't have a community. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, what I see is charming, appropriate, compatible, architecturally right. But I see that underneath the plan is going to present a problem to our community. So I'm of a divided mind on this, and I probably would not support what is proposed here, which is the conversion to a vacation rental without conforming.
You don't get to respond at this point.
Yeah.
We're going to go through and all make comments, and then we'll make a motion.
So I mean, without bringing the house into conformance, either as a single-family residence or as a proper use of R4 property. That's my comment.
Okay, thanks. Courtney?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Howard. It's a really charming neighborhood, and my sticking point, excuse me, at the last meeting was, I think short-term rentals are okay so long as someone is living, or a permanent resident of Santa Barbara or living in the actual unit and renting out a room, because that doesn't remove a housing unit from our market. And what we really need to be doing is preserving especially the single-family homes such as this, because what we're seeing is new units that are denser and taller, and that has its place in the community, but so do these homes. So I would not vote in support of this project.
Okay, Amy?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same, I'm in agreement with my fellow board members, just because we have been seeing this come in front of us before, and we've really been talking about, as Howard mentioned, there's the architecture, and then there is the community planning portion of it, and there is no issue with the architecture. It's more a matter of preserving the neighborhood and really keeping single-family homes within our community, because they're very hard to find. And we have a lot of dense housing coming through, but as Courtney mentioned, that we need to have a balance. So that's the reason that I wouldn't support the conversion.
Okay. David, differing comments?
No, I agree with everything Wetacha Board Member Miller stated.
Okay. I have no differing comments either. So would someone like to make a motion? It looks like the last time it was, let's see the way it was stated.
What is this?
Yeah.
Is it possible to say anything or not?
I don't know what you could say that's going to.
Well,
go ahead. I'll give you a minute. Half a minute.
Sorry. I understand the sentiment there, and the reality for us is that this housing unit's not going to be put back into the residential pool. I mean, it's just going to sit empty until we come up to it or until we stay in it. As
You could rent it.
vacation.
There's nothing that
Well,
prevents
see,
you from renting it.
if I rent it, I have to rent it full time, and I can't use it as a vacation home.
It just has to be over 30 days.
That's
Mhm.
true. You could do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Just
So,
plan your visits to Santa Barbara every trimester.
so Howard, if you have, do you have minutes from last time in front of you?
I don't actually,
Okay.
because I wasn't here the last time.
Okay, on page 7 of the minutes, the way it was, the motion was to deny the proposal with the following comments. Number 1, the board could not make the finding for consistency with the principles of sound community planning because, despite the fact that the residential use is legal,
Well,
we
that
wouldn't add
doesn't-
that.
that
Wouldn't add
doesn't
that.
add.
So we would just leave it at that it's doesn't meet the principles of sound community planning as a short-term rental.
Period.
Period. Is that okay? Would you like to make that motion?
I would repeat that motion.
Okay.
If, you know, I would, yeah, I think that's the same.
It would help if you said why.
Yeah, I think that second part, Mr.
Well-
Chairman, about housing. Housing is still a priority, and converting a residential unit to commercial hotel would be a loss for the neighborhood and the community at large.
The supporting the tourist economy of.
Okay, now you don't get to comment anymore, I'm sorry. This opportunity was over now.
Because single-family homes are important to,
Yeah,
a priority.
is it important to the supply of housing?
Right, for the residents.
Right, residential use.
It creates a decrease in long-term housing opportunities.
So that's
How would
motion?
you like to state it, Howard?
Well, just like that.
Okay, well, I need someone to articulate it,
Okay,
so
so-
why don't you let David?
All right, David, why don't you have it, you have the minutes there. Why
It
don't
creates
you-
a decrease in long-term housing opportunities. The proposal creates a decrease in long-term housing opportunities in the community.
These are findings, right? These are our
We're
findings.
stating why.
Yeah.
We're giving an example.
Renee, does that sound sufficient?
Mr. Chair, so I heard some other reasons you mentioned earlier. I wasn't sure if those are also included in the motion, which you were reading from the prior project, which was denied. Do those fold into your reasons for why you can't make the findings for sound community planning?
I think it's, number one, is it's not consistent with sound community planning because it removes another permanent house residence from the supply of permanent housing in the city, in the community. That's what it really boils down to.
Yeah, that's the
And
gist of what our.
if that's the finding of the board, that's perfectly acceptable. Just wanted to make sure, if that was the
That's the essence of
reason.
what that says there.
Yeah, I think that's enough.
And to the applicant, I don't think this is like the end of the world. I think you have to look at a plan in which you rent this out and plan your vacations and rent to people for 2 or 3 months and then maybe.
Very few people come for 2 or 3 months.
I understand. But that is the only way we can return it to you is so that you at least have some kind of revenue from the property.
Right. The reality is it'll sit empty for most of the year, and most likely, I'll have to defer maintenance on it. I mean,
Should we vote on this?
So we're done with discussion. We have a motion, and do you want to second the motion, Howard?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Hold on, they're not clear about the motion.
Howard
Board
made
member
it, I think.
Witosh made the motion.
Oh,
But we
yes.
switched over to David because he had the,
Perfect.
I'm happy to switch over to David on that and back him up. It's okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. So Matthew, am I understanding this correctly, that the last item was canceled?
It was
Postponed?
postponed at the applicant's request.
Okay,
Oh.
very good. So that closes our meeting for May 8th. Thanks for coming.
Very good.